Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March the 15th Dare County Board of Commissioners meeting. And at this time, I'd like to provide an invocation from George Laurie. It's an invocation, but he opens it with a couple of comments ahead of time, so I'll read those comments prior to the invocation. George says, first of all, I want to thank the Dare County Commissioners for allowing members of the North Dare Ministry Association to open each of your meetings with a prayer. It's been 5 months since my last prayer, and our county has made great strides in its handling of the coronavirus. I've asked God to guide our new president, our federal government agencies, our governors, and our state officials, and our local folks as they have planned and continued to plan a workable response to this crisis. On a personal note, my wife and I had received both of our vaccines, and the Dare County Health and Human Services Department should be recognized not just in Dare County, but statewide and nationwide for the incredible coordinated fashion in which they handle getting vaccines into arms. Every day, we read of places that can't get it right, yet we are so fortunate to live in a community where they really know how to do it perfectly. Kudos to them. I wish to continue to concentrate my thoughts into guiding our commissioners, our Dare County agencies, our fantastic Dare County nonprofit groups, our local officials, and our local business owners to continue working together as well as managing the impact of this pandemic on our beach community. Under God's watch, we hope that 2021 tourist season will be as busy as 2020 was. But we cannot let our guard down as another wave can appear at any time. I am so pleased to see that almost everyone wears a mask without incident. Let our firm belief in God guide us to make the difficult decisions that lie ahead. This is what leaders do, and I applaud all of you for trying to do the right by the OBX. If only our lawmakers in Washington and Raleigh could replicate how we do business, our country would be in a better place. So now let us pray. Blessed are you, Lord our God, sovereign of all, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to this season. We thank you and sing your praises for our lives, which are in your hands, and for our souls, which are in your keeping. You are goodness. You are compassion. You have always been our hope. Soften our hearts and open our minds. Grace us with your light when our path grows dark, with your strength when we grow weary, and with your support when we falter in our resolve. King of the universe, you have commanded us to do your work for the betterment of the Outer Banks. Be with these commissioners and others who serve Dare County on a daily basis. Guide them in what continues to be the challenge of a lifetime. May this be God's will, and let us say, Amen.
Amen.
I thank you. Stay safe and have a blessed day and blessed tourist season. May we stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. County Manager.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. First on the agenda is the chairman's opening remarks.
Thank you very much, County Manager. Y'all bear with me this evening. I have a few things certainly like to bring to everyone's attention. Just last week, for the second time in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I had the opportunity to once again meet with Representative Murphy with the home builders. He came and spoke with the home builders. We had a couple of hours meeting talking about the building industry and how he could potentially help there. I know later in the day he had an opportunity to meet with Commissioner Tobin, and he's been very supportive in our efforts with our inlets, our dredging, and a number of things. And Jim, I'm sure you'll speak to that with that meeting, but thank you for hosting him that afternoon. I know you got to show him the inlet, so that was good. So he's been here 2 or 3 times now in the last month, so he's wanting to do what he can to help us in any number of ways that we need help. I've gotten my vaccine, guys. I got it Saturday. I got the J&J vaccine, my wife and I. And knock on wood, God bless, I was fortunate. I had no soreness from the shot, and it's been 48 hours plus, and I haven't received any, I hadn't had a headache, I hadn't had any flu symptoms or anything like that, so I'm happy that I was able to receive it, one and done. And I would encourage my fellow citizens out there, if you have an opportunity, once you're eligible, please go take this vaccine. The other next item I have on Chairman's comments is finally, this guy's Danny. I know we've finally come to fruition with the Rodanthe-Sound launch area. We're going to end up closing the construction for that area for a little bit of time. But I'm happy to report that it was announced at the end of March. Construction's going to start April the 5th. And it's expected to take about 90 days, and it will remain closed for an additional 60 days, just to allow time for the work on the roadway and the parking lot to be completed. It's going to be a 2-lane boat dock with about 60-foot long floating center. If any of y'all familiar with Dock Street in Kill Devil Hills, it sounds like to me Commissioner House is going to be very similar
very close to
that boat ramp, and it's first class. I mean, it is really nice. And then it'll be about 14 to 16 parking spaces for vehicles and boat trailers, and it's going to be done in 2 phases. Phase 1 is going to be the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and then Phase 2 will be contracted out. So finally, glad to see this come to fruition, Commissioner Couch, and I know the folks down your way will appreciate that as well. Just recently, Current TV released a video. If you hadn't had a chance to see it, please do. It's in partnership with the town of Manteo, honoring Richard Etheridge and his historic P. Allen life-saving station. If you recall, we named the Lego Bridge, whatever we called that at the time, after him, in honor of him. And Current TV is highlighting his life in the historic life-saving station. The video is entitled "Freedman, Surfman, Hero," and it's a story of Richard Etheridge and the P. Allen life-saving station. It tells a unique story of the crew of the African-American surfmen who served their country at a time of immense racial divide in this country. Located in Roanoke Island, North Carolina, P. Allen Life-Saving Station was constructed in 1878, and in 1880 it became the first in the United States to be manned by an all-African-American crew surfman. The station was also the first in the nation to have African-American man, Richard Etheridge, who was born a slave on Roanoke Island on January the 16th in 1842 as the station's keeper and commanding officer. I'm sure all of you are aware of the great history behind that crew. Under his direction, the station was continually regarded as one of the best on the entire eastern seaboard, thanks to his remarkable crew and their efforts to save lives of hundreds of sailors who found themselves in distress due to perils of the graveyard of the Atlantic. In 1996, 100 years after P. Allen Life-Saving Station crew historic October 11, 1896 rescue of the passengers and crew who were aboard the E.S. Newsman when it ran aground off the coast of Roanoke during a hurricane. Etheridge and his all-black crew were posthumously awarded a Gold Life-Saving Medal of Honor by the United States Coast Guard for their courage and their dedication and their service of that day. The story and legacy of Richard Etheridge and the P. Allen Life-Saving Station can be found on display at the P. Allen Cookhouse Museum in Manteo, and you can go to www.pallenpreservationsociety.com. To watch this story, go to that website, and it'll be posted there from Current TV. So if you have a chance, please take the time to take a look at that. I know you will certainly enjoy it. Cooper, our governor, says Group 4 shots now moved up to March the 17th. And he announced this on March the 11th in a media briefing that members of that Group 4 would be eligible for the COVID vaccination starting March the 17th. Among those in Group 4, just so you know, who are eligible are individuals 16 to 64 years old with high-risk medical conditions that increase risk of severe disease from COVID, such as cancer, COPD, serious heart conditions, sickle cell disease, and type 2 diabetes. Group 4 in Dare County on Department of Health and Human Services by Director Dr. Davies announced they were now accepting vaccination registrations for individuals in Group 4. The one difference between the counties and the states is that because Pfizer is the only vaccine approved for vaccinating 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds, and Dare County has not been getting the Pfizer vaccine. So our DHS can only vaccinate those 18 and older with the underlying high-risk medical conditions. Anyone in Group 1 through 4 can go, once again, to www.darenc.com/COVID vaccine and complete the vaccination request form. So if you fall in that category, once again, I strongly encourage you to register for that. And then finally, I'm sure a number of you have seen we finally got some occupancy results and some figures. Commissioner Bateman, I know the Vistas Bureau was waiting patiently to get those numbers. some sections of the economy, I must admit, suffered considerable COVID pandemic issues with respects to opening up, especially our restaurants and other retail locations due to COVID last year in 2020. But there were some that knocked it off the charts, and that's our rental companies. They had record numbers. In December of 2020, the occupancy collections totaled about $11.3 million, which was up 73% from December 2019, a total of $6.5 million. And even as recently as 2018, that number was only $4.8 million. That's huge. That is huge. And that's in spite of the fact that we were shut down for 60 days. So those numbers are off the chart. The occupancy revenues exceeded from the second half of 2019 by almost $90 million in that particular industry. So I wish it was as strong for our restaurants and our retail, but unfortunately it wasn't. But those numbers were off the chart as far as rentals go. And with that, County Manager, that ends my chairman's comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to public comment. We're going to try something a little different this time, public comment. We're going to allow public comment by email as we've been doing, but we're also going to try to allow some people that have signed up previously. When we put our notices out, we ask people to sign up, and if they did, we're going to call on them and try to get some live public comment for you all as well. As with other public comment, our public comment is going to be limited to 3 minutes. 5 minutes. We changed that.
Yeah.
And so we'll be timing that, and if we get close to 5 minutes, I'll remind whoever's speaking that their time is just about up. And so for those of you who are on the list, when I call your name, it may take us a second for the technology to catch up, but we'll bring you on if you'll tell us your name again and then tell us where you're from, and then you're free to make public comment for 5 minutes. First on the list, I have Corey Bonner. Corey, are you on yet?
Oh, yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay, if you tell us where you're from and then you start your public comment, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Corey Bonner. I'm a citizen of Avon, North Carolina, based and moved here last year. I want to thank you for the opportunity to very quickly speak. Kind of reviewed all the different pieces in the history of some of this stuff. I'd like to ask 3 questions, really. One, has anybody from Dare County considered using the National Incident Management System, NIMS? The only reason I specifically point that out is Dare County's emergency response plan very clearly has overwash as one of the things that Dare County has to respond to. And it seems like the last time we talked about this, we weren't getting a lot of collaboration amongst, state, national park services or anything else like that. And really the second one really is it's going back and looking at the history with the other towns within Dare County, it doesn't seem to be an accurate representation to the citizens of Avon. Avon's a village basically caught between a national park and a national seashore. So getting a little bit of backfeed. Sorry about that. Is there anything that we can basically do that aligns Dare County and the national park system to basically come up with a more effective solution to taxing citizens for a beach and a road that we don't own? And I'll let my comment expire there.
Thank you. Next, we have Timothy Caruso. Mr. Caruso's not on. All right. Next, we have Janet Freemuth. Janet's not on either. Next, we have Marianne Marshall.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Please state your name and tell us where you're from.
again, I do appreciate the opportunity to view this meeting and to be able to speak at the meeting. After the last meeting, I did become convinced that for the good of the community, something probably should be tried to do the beach nourishment. And at the same time, I still have big concerns about District A and District B. It just seems to me that that was drawn up in a pretty arbitrary and unfair way. And comments that other people made last week pretty much solidified that opinion of mine. One woman said that Kinnicky Boulevard floods which is on the west side of the Highway 12, when Ocean Isle Drive floods. And somebody from north of due east asked about what'll happen when there's erosion at his oceanfront property. And I don't know if there's been any consideration for that down the road. My property is 5 lots back from the oceanfront. I don't have a problem with flooding, and other than when there's rain, because my lot is low. I'm much closer to Highway 12, and it just seems unfair that I would be in a District A instead of a District B. And I'm hoping that there'll be consideration given to just having one district, as there is in Buxton. And if that were the case, then I would definitely feel like, as a part of the community there, I should make a contribution. I did the math to see what my increase would be in my taxes, and it would actually be a 45% increase. And that's a lot. So our property has been in my family since 1975, and my grandchildren are the 4th generation to enjoy time there, and we love Avon, and I guess that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Roger Lambert. Not there. Do we have anybody else, Matt? Yes. Okay. Daniel Twining, are you on?
Daniel what?
Twining.
Yes, hello, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, please tell us your name and where you're from, please.
Yeah. Hi, Daniel Twining. We're beachfront owners in Avon on Bartlett Lane. We just strongly support the proposal for beach replenishment, and we just appreciate the commission's good work. Obviously, saving the beach is essential to the entire community, and we are willing to pay our fair share. So I just wanted to offer a vote of support and to thank you all for the extraordinary diligence and work that's gone into this. I understand it's tough. No one wants their taxes raised, but some things are worth paying for, at least until there's a more permanent solution. So thank you all.
Thank you. Dominic Ross, are you on? Mr. Ross? Our showed that you're self-muted, Mr. Ross. Could you unmute yourself?
I have this irresistible urge to ask his answer his question. He keeps asking for Mr. Ross. Of course.
That's still muted, Matt. Mr. Ross, we can't get you on, so we're going to move to the next. Anybody else, Matt? Pete. I can't hear you. Perk. Roberto.
Hello?
Perk. Are you on?
Yeah, I'm on.
Please,
Hello?
please tell us your name. We couldn't understand it. So if you tell us your
My
name,
name
where you're
is
from.
Pierce. I'm a Navy veteran. I now reside in the area. And I have one question because I'm doing a research on the county. And I would like if you'd be able to provide me information as a source, if that is okay with you guys.
This is public comment. We don't answer questions or debate in public comment. So if you have questions, you can contact us online or whatever. We'll be glad to answer your questions, but we don't answer questions during public comment.
So what do we do during public comment?
Because it's public comment.
Do you have anything to address the board with? Okay. Anyone else?
Ray Hollowell.
Okay, Ray Hollowell. Mr. Hollowell, are you on? Mr. Hollowell? Is he muted? Mr. Hollowell, we're not hearing you on our end. Are you there? All right. Anyone else, Matt? Cynthia Morgan, are you on? You're muted, I think. Could you unmute yourself, Ms. Morgan? Ms. Morgan, are you on?
Yeah.
All right, if you'd tell us your name and where you're from, please.
Cynthia Morgan. I don't have a comment, I'm just watching, and.
Cannot understand her, Bobby.
Okay, you're going to
Stop
need
her.
to either get closer to your mic. We can barely hear you.
Okay, just supporting the project, that's all.
I say technology is the answer, guys.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm supporting the project.
There's something going on your end with your mic because we're not picking you up on our end. Move to the next. That's it. That's all that we have for public comment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, County Manager.
And with that, we'll move to item 3 on the agenda. This is a broadband presentation from Derek Kelly with the Government Affairs Director of Lumen Technologies. Lumen Technologies is the successor to CenturyLink. This agenda item was prompted by some discussions and some work that Commissioner Overman's doing for the last few months, trying to figure out broadband in Dare County, where our problems were, what our issues are, and then what our solutions are. And in doing his homework and going through that work, he had a conversation with Mr. Kelly, who volunteered to come and sort of give you an overview and give you some discussions about where broadband stands and sort of what we can do in the future. I think I said that right, Commissioner Overman, is that correct? And with that said, we'll turn it over to Mr. Kelly, and I think he's got a PowerPoint, and he's going to take you all through it.
Welcome, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yes, sir.
It looks like I am sharing the wrong screen. Hang on one second. I apologize for that. Are you able to see my PowerPoint now?
Yes. Yes.
Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry about that. I apologize. I'm going to try to flip everything real quick. But thank you for the opportunity tonight, and thank you, Commissioner Overman, for reaching out to us. Lumen, we did change the name of our parent company a couple months ago, but we are still operating under the CenturyLink brand for our consumer and small business areas. So Lumen is more of our enterprise business that sort of spans 60 countries. But you'll still see our trucks and our CenturyLink employees in your local market. But they had us all change our email signatures just to confuse everyone a little bit. So I'm going to try to quickly just go through how I see state of broadband in Dare County, talk a little bit about the FCC's latest announcement, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, talk about the state's broadband grant program called the GREAT Grant, or Growing Rural Economies with Access to Technology. Talk about some of the challenges we face in Dare County, and then just open it up for any questions. So this is a snapshot of the FCC's broadband map, and how I have it filtered right now is showing any areas that have access to 25x3 service. So that's 25 megabits coming into your home and 3 megabytes coming out of your home.
Derek,
So when you think of me, yes.
could you take one moment for some of us that may not have a frame of reference that 25 in and 3 out is good or bad, high or low, and what it might be comparable to, so we have a little bit better feel, if you could?
Absolutely. So if you think the two easiest ways I define it is, if you think about a Netflix video, if you're watching it at high definition, you need about 5 or 6 megs of download speed, so coming into your house to get that service. So when you think about a 25 meg connection, theoretically you could watch four Netflix movies at the same time. Now, when we think about this GoToWebinar, or if the students are using Google Meet or Microsoft Teams, all the different video platforms, most of them will say you need about 6 to 8 megabits of download speed to watch the other stream, and then you need about 2 megs of upload to upload your video so other people can see you. So if you would have asked me 13 months ago if I thought 10 megs down, that used to be the standard the FCC went by, closed the homework gap, I would have said, yes, a 10 meg download speed would have closed the homework gap. Students can do the research. You can watch a Netflix video. You may not be able to watch multiple at the same time, but you could more or less do all the homework that you need to do. You know, fast forward to the pandemic and sending all of our students home and many of our employees home. 10 by 1 connection really isn't cutting it for that environment. You might be able to have one session going on with okay video, but for the families that have more than one student at home, or if a parent's trying to do this while the student's in the next room, you're really going to struggle. And 25x3 is really the table stakes for being able to have multiple sessions like this going on in the household. So when you see this map, if you see the green areas, that's showing you where there's at least one provider offering 25 meg and 3 meg of upload in those census blocks. If you see a couple of spots where you see more, sort of a darker shade, that means there's more than one company, but it's available in that area. And so one of the challenges the FCC map has is that if one home in a census block has service, that entire census block is served. So if you think of these large census blocks that are down around Stumpy Point, if there's one house in this big block that has service, that gets served or shows as served. The FCC recently put out an order to improve the maps, not the latest round of stimulus or pandemic relief bill that just was signed by the president, but the one before that actually gave the FCC the funds they need to get the next generation of maps out there that'll be much more location-based. But the idea, or the example I always give, is if you plug in an address, say on Highway 264, it's a very long highway, and you can be driving down the road and your GPS will say 1 mile to your destination, and then you drive right by the building 2 seconds later. It's because there's issues with geocoding and knowing exactly where every home is actually located. The FCC has the framework now in place, and we hope to have much more accurate maps in about 12 to 18 months. So if I zoom in, because it's a little hard to see, here's a closer view of the areas that are showing as not having service in Dare County. Are you getting feedback on your end?
We're good. We're good.
Okay. So basically it's showing everywhere around East Lake is unserved. And if I zoomed in really far, you would see there's one census block around Stumpy Point that's unserved. Pea Island shows as unserved, although I don't think there's any homes until you get down into Rodanthe. The same thing around Wanchese. There's a couple blocks that show unserved, and a lot of the land around the Alligator Wild Refuge, but I don't see many homes located in there. So the biggest areas I see are the ones that I'm going to get into in the next map. So This is the FCC issued or awarded auction winners back in December, what's called the RDOF, or Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. So the program kicks off in 2022, or the funding mechanism, and it's a 6-year build out. But CenturyLink won the auction to provide service to every home. So the big areas you see down around East Lake, there's one more census block down along the county border, and then there's one census block in and around Stumpy Point. The grant, or the final applications for the program, were actually just put into the FCC in late January, so we're very early on in the process. But basically, by us winning this auction, we're going to bring gigabit speeds of fiber to the home for every one of the locations, whether they be homes or small businesses in all of these census blocks. It is a 6-year build-out program. It's not to say we're going to take 6 years to build out to every one of those. It could be that they get built in year one. It could be that they're in a later year. We'll know that as we get a little bit closer time frame. We'll start getting some year-by-year projections on where we're going to build, but there's some milestones that we have to hit throughout that program. So the North Carolina General Assembly started up the GREAT program about 2 years ago, but we've gone through 3 rounds. So the first round was in 2019, and that was only open up to Tier 1 counties of the state. And then last year, we ended up having a regular round of GREAT, and then the General Assembly ended up appropriating an extra $30 million to have a supplemental round. And when they did that, they opened it up to Tier 2 counties. So when you look at that program, right now the definition of unserved is any areas that have less than 25 and 3, but then the round that happened last year, there was a little caveat that said at least 90% of your projects should be homes that don't have access to 10-1 service. So if we look at a Dare County map, just looking census block by census block, this is how it currently looks. Now I've done a quick review overlaying that previous map I showed you of what areas we're going to build with RDOF, and this map, and remove some of the shading so I could actually see if there was homes. And while it looks like there's a lot of green, most of that green is either water or census blocks that didn't have any homes or businesses located in them. Did a zoom in of that, and same thing. So all the blocks and all the homes I could see up around East Lake were going to be part of our RDOF application. There's one census block down at the very bottom. And there you can see, if you have good eyes, you can see the one little green census block that we've committed to serve. Now, when we get down to serve that census block, there's only about 5 or 6 homes in there. I would assume we'll end up placing fiber to the homes to some of the surrounding homes, but it's a little too early in the construction project to know if we're going to do that or not. So I'll pause there and open it up for any questions.
This is Commissioner Overman. Really appreciate you coming down and talking about this today. I know you don't have any feel for time. Do you have any idea as to when you will start to put together what your plans are from a timing standpoint?
I'm hoping by the end of the year we'll have at least a tentative time frame of what we're anticipating to do for at least the first few years.
And
go ahead, I'm sorry.
And what kind of help can I think you mentioned early on, what kind of help can counties who are needing this service, which obviously we are, what can counties do to help out through the RDOF or the GREAT program as supplemental?
So thank you. I skipped over that. So with the RDOF program, nothing comes to mind right now. You know, all the permitting and stuff that we normally go through, all of our engineers are used to dealing with all the DOT districts that are responsible for helping us with those permits. When it comes to the GREAT grant, one of the challenges we face when you look at a county like Dare, where it looks like, especially when you get over to Manio, Wanchese, and everywhere along the beach, it appears that cable service has service to every single home in those areas. That's not necessarily the case. So if you are hearing complaints that access is not available in some of those areas, feel free to funnel them to me. That's one of the best things that counties can help with right now, is helping us identify if there are
So frustrating.
unserved pockets in the areas that look like they're served.
Drives me nuts.
And then if that is the case, and we're able to identify some areas of the county where they're unserved, that we're able to put in an application through the GRAPE program. One of the things that counties can do, which helps give additional points in the scoring system, is to come in and partner with a provider. So last year we had 3 counties that basically contributed 10% of our required match. So for that round, CenturyLink had to provide 30% of the funding for the program. So the county essentially had to provide 3% of the overall project. And that allowed us to get extra partnership status. And all 3 of our projects that had partners ended up being funded.
So in other words, if you get partial funding through RDOF or GRAPE program, then and that's 70%, and that leaves you with 30%. Then whatever the percentage is left, the counties that come in to partner with you pay 10% of that, of your amount, right?
Correct. That's the minimum required for the partnership status. Now, you know, when we run through an internal business case, it's not to say that we wouldn't need something larger than that, but that's the minimum amount, and that's all we asked for those 3 counties last time, is enough to get that partnership status and pretty much cement that we would get those projects funded, because the state wants to incentivize working with our localities when it comes to the grant program. As far as RDOF, that funding that does not require any additional funding from the county. So we've committed to get the support from the FCC and to deploy those services. So we don't need anything above and beyond to serve those areas of East Lake or down around Stumpy Point.
Right. Well, do counties who partner with you have a I'll say it the only way I know how to say it. If a county partners with you, will they get preferential treatment over counties who do not partner with you?
Talking about from the state's perspective or from our perspective?
I'm talking about from your perspective as it relates to time.
When it comes to the GRAPE grant, definitely if there's counties that are interested in doing that, we will definitely make sure we do a deep dive and work with you versus, you know, we're going through right now, we have a list of about 23 counties that we're trying to review. We serve about 68 counties in North Carolina. We've narrowed that down to 23 that we want to try at least doing some level of review on. We have Dare County in that list right now because of this conversation. So the county showing an interest in reaching out to us definitely helps with making sure it's on the radar. And if we know that the county could be interested in helping financially with that, you know, definitely puts it near the top of the list.
You showed East Lake on the mainland as an RDOF. That's what you got the bid on, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and you don't require any help with that. But based on the balance of the county, how do you ascertain an estimate as to how much that's going to ultimately be versus great grant money that's available for those areas?
Well, and that's where we're struggling to even find any additional areas, because everywhere else we've looked is either showing that they're served by the cable company or by us. And that's where if the county, if you are hearing from constituents other than in that East Lake area that they don't have access to service, if you can help with funneling that information to me, then we can do some extra due diligence to check those areas out. But otherwise, when we look up and down Hatteras Island and up through Nags Head, Kitty Hawk, all those areas, and even Manio and Wanchese, it appears like everywhere is covered by the cable company. And if that's not the case, we're happy to dig into any areas if you're aware of them.
Yeah, well, we are having conversation with the cable folks as well as to how that can potentially be a partnership with them too to reach these underserved areas. And that's just part of the whole package that we're looking at here. And that was why the contact was made with you all to see what your timing was. We don't really feel like we have 6 years, quite honestly. I personally have been on a 10 meg maximum for 10 years probably. It's been a long time. And I know there's a lot of other folks in the county that's the same way. On your website, it shows that town of Manio gets like 30 or 40 megs if you're in the town. And certainly appreciate the fact that everything you do going forward is going to be fiber optic, and you're going to offer 1 gig of service in that, and that's outstanding. But we're just kind of up against it time-wise here with the folks, particularly COVID has exacerbated that, as you know, and we're just trying to get moving on it in any way that we can potentially help. That's the reason for the questions, to find out, start getting some estimates on what our part would be to partner with you, where necessary.
Absolutely. And I believe there's been some conversations going on at Congress about different ways to try speeding up the timelines, maybe coming up with some type of incentives if providers are able to beat that timeline. So that's still to be determined. But as I get more information, happy to continue to reach out and just update everyone with the status of those projects. I don't know if it's the good or the bad. We were not as successful in North Carolina with the RDOF auction as I would have liked. So really, we only have projects in 2 counties. There's milestones that we have to hit throughout the years, and if we have to hit a certain number of households in each year, and we only have 2 counties, one would lead me to believe that we could end up doing 1 county 1 year, another county another year. But it's until we actually get the plans from our planning and our finance team, I can't give you the definitive timeline.
Are your milestones, because I know you had bids all across the nation, are your milestones just based on a number of households, no matter what state it's in? I mean, is that a nationwide milestone?
I actually asked that same question of today, and I haven't gotten an answer back yet. When the last round of funding was called the Connect America Fund, and we had to hit that milestone on a per state basis, and I'm not sure if RDOF is set up the same way or if it's going to be a nationwide milestone.
Did I understand you to say that there are only 2 counties in North Carolina that you were successful with RDOF bids?
Yep.
Correct. It was Dare County and I think Scotland County.
Okay. So if it comes down as a state-by-state deal, then we're in pretty good shape, I would think.
I would tend to believe that's an accurate statement.
Gotcha. Thank you, Derek.
Anyone else have any questions of
Yeah,
Derek?
I did, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Hey, Derek, thank you very much. This is Rob Ross again. I got a little tangled and confused. You were describing that other than East Lake, everywhere in Dare County has service. And Vice Chairman Oberman was explaining that for years, he's been under 10. So I'm trying to get a grip on what would be the cost, if I had a magic wand, to provide 25/3 service to all of Dare County. Do we know that number?
So, and I believe Commissioner Overman is in the East Lake community, right?
No.
No,
I'm on Roanoke Island.
he's on Roanoke Island.
Okay. And do you have access to Spectrum?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's why his area is showing as served, which would make it ineligible for the Great Grant. So if Spectrum has service there, I think their starting speed is 200 megs down and 10 megs up. So or in some areas it may be 100 by 5 or something like that. Those areas would not be eligible for the grant program.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute. Now I'm confused again. You must have 100 by 5, Wally, not under 10.
No, I don't have cable.
He doesn't have,
So let me clarify then. If everybody in Dare County had access but declined cable, do we have broadband or don't we?
Well, you would have.
If they have,
They have
service
one. They start at
available
100.
to you,
They,
those
Let me hear-
census blocks
let
would show
Derek.
served. and it would make them ineligible for the grant programs.
Yeah, see, I'm trying to separate between, there's broadband access, and you've chosen not to get cable to access it, versus there is no cable, there is no access, whether you wanted it or not. And I'm, quite frankly, confused by the two.
If you
So-
have access to cable,
Yes, sir.
you can get, they start at 100, I think it goes 100, 300, 400, or 100, 200, 400, something like that, in speed. So you could, in essence, switch to cable if you wanted to, and have at least that much speed.
Okay,
This is the phone company,
okay,
which pretty much everybody has
okay,
access to. In
Okay.
my particular case, I'm on a DSL system, and 10 megs is the highest that it offers. Derek just mentioned that 25 these days is basically considered a minimum, just a bare minimum. But their decision has been that any I'm trying to find the right words, that anything that they do going forward is going to be all optic, and it's going to provide 1 gigabyte of service going forward.
Correct. For the very first grant round, we did a couple DSL projects. But the issue with DSL is the further away from our equipment is, the slower your speeds are. So in order for us to do a 25x3 service, you have to be within about 3,500 feet of our equipment. So if we were going to go and build in a new area, if we have to get fiber within 3,500 feet of you and we can only provide 25 meg out to 3,500 feet, it ends up being a better long-term investment for us to just go ahead and place fiber to every single one and have gigabit speeds. Now, one of the struggles we have in the areas where we already have service is we charge the same price whether you can get 10 meg or 100 meg today. And then if you want gigabit service, we charge about $15 more. And so it creates a challenging business environment for us to go and overbuild where we already have some level of speed. So, you know, in areas of Manio, I think we have 40 and maybe some 80 meg areas. And then it goes down depending how far you are from our equipment. Well, if we were to go and overlay all those areas with fiber to the home, most of our customers, I'd say probably 75% of our existing customers would switch over to it and pay us the exact same amount of money. And then you'd have about 25% of the customers might pay us an extra $15. So it's one of the challenges we face with our existing areas, and we've focusing more on the areas that don't have service or have service of less than 10 megs, where we can apply for a grant to try helping those areas.
So Derek, with the getting back to what you just said, do areas that have the 10 meg service right now qualify for any great grant money?
They do, as long as so if we're the only provider there and we have 10 meg today, yes, they qualify for the grant program.
Okay, and you're trying to ask them, the legislature, to go up to 25 on that also, right?
Correct, because right now the definition moved to 25 and 3, but they still want at least 90% of your application to be below 10 meg. So that's what we're requesting, to either remove that 90% threshold or at least make it where it might be like a 50-50 difference or something, where the state is still giving some preference to the areas, because there are areas of our state that still have 0 meg today.
Yeah.
From any provider. And that's where some of the legislators still want to make sure we're focusing on those areas and not losing sight of them. But when you get into these rural areas, if you look at all the grants that have been giving out, plus all the FCC stuff, the areas without service are becoming smaller and smaller if you only look at the areas less than 10 meg. So if you can broaden it and look at some areas that maybe have 10 or 20 meg with those 0 meg areas, you can create a bigger project that has more economies of scale. But for the example in Manio, if CenturyLink has 10 meg service to a house today, but Spectrum also offers service, even if the customer doesn't want that Spectrum service, we wouldn't be able to go after grant dollars because Spectrum is already there.
Derek Irvin Bateman here. So if my understanding is correct, East Lake and Stumpy Point, neither one have spectrum?
From what I can see, Stumpy Point has some service, but they are just missing that one census block for whatever reason. It got lumped in the FCC's definition. But when I looked at the rest of the area around the water there, it looked like the rest of the homes had access to spectrum.
And how about East Lake?
I do not see any spectrum up there.
Okay.
I think they only go into Wanchese, and I don't think they go any further in the mainland till you're over in Washington or Hyde.
Okay, the reason I was asking, in one of your previous maps, you had different colors of green, and some was almost a blue. I noticed that Kitty Hawk was more of a blue instead of the green color. Is that where spectrum is there? Is that what the different colors where that slide were?
So if you see the darker shade, that means both us and Spectrum have faster than 25 by 3 speeds.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking that is that I've had numerous calls from folks in the Kitty Hawk Landing area, which is on the western point of the village, that their students were having a hard time. They were losing between the classes and all kinds of stuff on the point out there. And they have cable service with Spectrum. And I just, if they have Spectrum there and they have that many megabytes, I don't understand why they would be losing service.
It probably comes down to an operational question. I think someone mentioned that you have Spectrum lined up to come speak, but if you need a contact with them, I can relay to you some of my peers with them. But if we were to go after a grant area for one of those, they could basically say to the state, no, we have access to those speeds here, and they would basically kick those areas out of our grant application, which is why we try to do our best due diligence to make sure we never apply for areas where they have service today.
Right, okay. Well, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Derek? Well, Derek, thank you so much for your time this evening. We really appreciate you taking the time to address the board.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
County Manager?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda. That's the discussion for the tax service district in Avon. You all are at the presentation, so I'm not going to go back through all that history and all that again, but where we are now is we're at a point where if we're going to do this, and we think we're going to do this, then we've got to start a process to create the tax service district. There's a statutory process for that. We have to send out some notices. We have to send out some maps. We have to do some publications. We have to have a public hearing. We have to do all those things. And so really, when it says on there, approve the tax service district and all that on your agenda sheet, that's really not what we're doing, because you set the tax rate when you approve your budget, and you'll create the tax district once all of the stuff that I've got to do under the statute gets done. That would then allow you to create the district. So that all comes down the road. What I need tonight is your approval for me to begin that process. Which, that means it appears we're going to move forward with some kind of a project, and if we are, then we've got to start the process to create that district to pay for it. And so I need to know whether or not to begin that process. You will come back later to have a vote on actually putting the district in place once I've done all the things on the checklist, and you'll come back later in the budget process when you approve the tax rate for the county and everything else. You also at that time would approve the tax rate for the tax service district. So there's at least 2 more votes that you'd have to do before any of this becomes final. And so what I'm looking for tonight is whether to move forward with that process or not. If we're going to do it, our window is closing. It takes about 60 days to do it, and it means we would have to do it, get all that done, so that you'd be in a position to approve it when you approve the budget at the end of May or the 1st of June. So we've got enough time, we got plenty of time, but we don't have an inordinate amount of time.
I move to authorize county manager to proceed.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Ross, but I want to make sure the motion is clear. in that we're authorizing the county manager to begin the process to establish an Avon service district. Is that correct? That's what
That's
you're
what I
looking
need,
for?
yes, sir.
And that's the motion you intend, correct, Commissioner Ross?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll
Is there,
second it.
pardon?
I'll second it.
Is seconded by that motion by Commissioner Tobin. The floor is open for discussion. Okay, hearing no discussion, then those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that brings us to item 5 on the agenda, and that's a proclamation establishing April 2021 as North Carolina 811 Safe Digging Month.
Okay, thank you, County Manager. Just for the board's point, NC 811 Safe Digging Month is in its 43rd year of service to the citizens of North Carolina. North Carolina One Call System is known as this NC 811, and it's a very vital part of preventing damages and injuries when excavating. The fast and easiest communication link with your local utility providers, they started this in 1978, and the law requires that anyone engaged in demolition or excavation activities needs to contact NC 811 at least 3 days prior to beginning the work. That will allow the facility operators to have those full 3 working days to make mark the facility, the facilities. So I'm reminding everyone out there in public that does this, remember to call 811. It's also important after a storm to prevent potential injuries as well. So I'm going to ask the county manager at this time to read the proclamation.
This is a proclamation proclaiming April 2021 as North Carolina 811 Safe Digging Month. Whereas utility owners, excavators, designers, and homeowners work to keep pace with North Carolina's economic development, it is important to minimize damages to underground utility lines, dangers to workers and to the general public, environmental impact, and loss of utility services to the citizens of North Carolina. And whereas North Carolina 811, a utility service notification center and leader in education, celebrates its 43rd year of continuous service to the state, is key to preventing injuries and damages when excavating. And whereas this unique service provides easy, one-call notification about construction and excavation projects that may endanger workers and jeopardize utility lines while promoting workplace and public safety, reducing underground utility damage, minimizing utility service interruptions, and protecting the environment. And whereas this vital service, which began in 1978, served the citizens of North Carolina from the mountains to the coast, educates stakeholders about the need for excavation safety, whether the project is as small as planting a tree to designing and beginning construction on a new interstate. And whereas in 2020, the North Carolina One Call System received 2.1 million notification requests and transmitted over 12.2 million requests, providing protection to utility companies' infrastructure, their employees, excavators, and customers. Now therefore be it resolved, we, the Dare County Board of Commissioners, designate the month of April 2021 as North Carolina 811 Safe Digging Month to encourage all excavators and homeowners of Dare County to contact 811 either by dialing 811 or contacting NC 811 via the webpage of nc811.org at least 3 working days prior to digging in order to know what's below, avoid injury, protect the environment, prevent millions of dollars in damage, and to remind excavators that 3 working days notice is the law for safe digging is no accident, and more information may be obtained by visiting www.nc811.org. This is the 15th day of March 2021.
Move to adopt the proclamation.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner House. Commissioner House made the motion to adopt the proclamation. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Bateman. Are those, the floor is open for discussion. Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, item 6 is a public health proclamation from the Health and Human Services called Take Down Tobacco Day 2021. I think we have a video for that.
Vape are 5 times more likely to have COVID-19 related symptoms.
On average, a smoker's life expectancy is 10 years less than non-smokers.
People who vape are 7 times more likely to get COVID.
In North Carolina, 14,200 adults die from smoking-related illnesses.
This is why we're asking you, our Dare County Board of Commissioners, to help us take down tobacco.
This proclamation on April 1st, 2021.
Mr. Chairman, I have a proclamation. It's called Take Down Tobacco Day. Whereas traditional cigarette usage in teens has been on a downward trend over the past decade, smoking overall has been on an upward trend due to the emergence of a new product, an electronic cigarette. These products are more commonly referred to as e-cigarettes and or Juuls. Whereas these products are easily accessible to the youth population, come in a variety of flavors, and at an extremely low cost. The lack of a distinct smell and the inconspicuous nature of the devices make them easy to conceal. Therefore, their use often goes unnoticed. Whereas according to information provided by the Centers for Disease Control, the number of high schoolers who are smoking actively at least once a day is on the rise, and over the past 2 years, the number of students that have developed a smoking habit has more than doubled, with 9 out of 10 cigarette smokers starting the habit by the age of 18. And whereas although our community has also seen an increase in smokers, mainly in the high school age, middle schoolers still present a cause for concern. And whereas the Dare County Health and Human Services Department has provided education, spread awareness, and offered intervention links for our youth population, the use of electronic cigarettes continues to present a challenge to the health and well-being of our youth population. Whereas Dare County has been proactive in responding to this challenge by prohibiting the use of electronic cigarettes in restaurants and bars, this primarily targets adults in our community. And whereas Dare County needs to acknowledge the problem that we currently face with tobacco use among our youth and encourage our community to focus attention on e-cigarette use in young people. Now therefore be it resolved that we, the Dare County Board of Commissioners, do hereby proclaim the day of April 1st, 2021 as Take Down Tobacco Day, and call upon the people of Dare County to increase their awareness and understanding of the problems we face regarding tobacco use amongst our youth. This is the 15th day of March 2021.
Mr. Chairman, at the top of our agenda every week, how will these decisions impact our children and families? We just saw a video where our children here in Dare County are asking for this proclamation. I so move this proclamation.
All right, thank you, Commissioner House. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Tobin. Floor is open for any discussion.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, sir, Commissioner Ross.
I was quite impressed with the students in that video. I am equally impressed with the message they're promoting. I am slightly less impressed and or distressed by what I frequently see in media as far as the promotion of advancing the expansion, legalization, and use of marijuana. And I'm wondering, it just occurred to me as I was watching these great kids in this campaign, which I fully support, is there an equally ambitious, aggressive, and demonstrative campaign to make sure any advancing of other intoxicants, especially with what I have seen broad scale elsewhere in the country, the legalization of marijuana? And I'm looking kind of at County Manager. I don't know that you would know that or not, Bobby. I just thought I wanted to ask the question.
I don't know.
This
I would
Power Peer Group that
Yeah.
is doing that. I think it was a couple of years ago, if not, maybe 3 years ago, did a presentation in front of this board about the use of marijuana and trying to put that at bay as well.
That's what I'm basically
So, yeah.
looking for, a partner initiative or resolution saying, we're on board here and we're on board on this other. You know, it's, because I keep seeing these, and again, maybe I'm a selective media watcher, I don't know. But there seems to be this growing acceptance. It's fine, guys. Why shouldn't, 14-year-olds be smoking marijuana? It's fine. It's not fine. So anyway, I was disturbed by that, but highly encouraged by this.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Chairman, that brings us to item 7 on the agenda. For a while, how long has it been, Dorothy? Dorothy's been working for a long time on social media policy because we don't have a Facebook page and all that for the county. And for most of that time, she's been working to convince me that that's the direction that we ought to have been going. Caitlin has been on board now for how long? 4 or 5 months, and she's devoted a lot of time to that too. And so we've had some meetings, and we're going to move forward with trying to improve our social media presence through all of the social media mechanisms. Our goal is to have a way to communicate, and people seem to communicate that way, and we need to get our information out. And so they have developed a social media policy. They've been working on it for a while. We've been through several versions, and this is the version that they would ask you to adopt. I'll stop there, and I'll turn it over to Dorothy and Caitlin, and they can take you through this.
Good evening, Ms. Hester.
Good evening, Commissioners. I guess I need to take my mask off.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to present this proposed policy this evening. It's something, as the county manager said, we've been talking about it for quite a while now, and I'm just excited to bring it forward for your consideration. Caitlin Kite is our PR specialist here with me tonight, and she has an essential role in developing and overseeing not only our website, but also our social media. Our other team member, Stephanie Banfield, she's not here tonight. She's our PR coordinator, but she also has a role and would help develop content and to monitor the website and the social media. Let me get you may ask, why is this necessary? The current policy that's in place is almost a decade old. It was adopted in 2012, so 9 years ago. And we know that a lot has changed since then. It's estimated that back then about 45% of people were on social media. That number today is about 72%. And most everyone that's on there is getting their news that way. That's how people get news. I know y'all have heard that. Social media is a critical component for effective communications. It can be used for all types of messaging. Safety and emergency, certainly we think of it in that way, but also for things such as job recruitment, special events, and just to share general information about all of our different departments and services, because there are a lot of them, and some people are quite unfamiliar with all that we do. We do have a presence on Facebook. We actually, our individual departments, that's the approach that we took when we first developed our social media policy. But there is a need for some general county government accounts so that we can consolidate the messaging and ensure consistency. So in thinking about the broad mission of all our departments and our audiences, diverse audiences, and our unique geography, the social media tools really are ideal for connecting with our citizens, those who live here, those who own property here, and even those who enjoy visiting. You might ask about what's new. The newest part is that this policy is very condensed. Our last policy was 9 pages. This one is 4. So we deleted a lot. At that time, there were a lot of details for each different platform. So we've really just cleaned it up and made it more concise and more condensed. So the website is our primary communications tool. And the social media tools would continue to serve as our secondary platforms for communicating. And the primary purposes really do remain the same. So we just would like to disseminate emergency information quickly, promote county-sponsored events, activities, services, and other news, and then always try to refer everyone back to the content that we have on the website. So what social media channels are included in the policy? They remain the same. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Flickr are the 5 that we have, and those would stay in place. And just to give you an overview of what we have, our existing accounts, we have 10 Facebook accounts. I guess I can go through those. 3 are Parks and Rec, each division. Probably need to put my glasses on so that I can. We have the Baum Center, the Dare County Center, the Sheriff's Department, the airport, the library, Health and Human Services, and Current TV. Those are the 10 existing pages. We have 3 Twitter accounts, a general Dare County, an emergency management, and Current TV, 2 YouTube accounts, the Dare County government, which is where we're live streaming tonight, and then 1 for Current TV. And the only Instagram account is for Current TV. So that's what we have in place now.
Dorothy, on Facebook, you mentioned 10. I'm looking at this document. I'm missing 1. Do you have that available?
The Fessenden Center?
What are we missing? The Fessenden Center, is that what we're missing?
I think you're missing in there either the sheriff's or the airport.
Yeah, I don't see airport or sheriff on there, so that's probably what it is.
The Fessenden and the Parks and Rec serve as one and the same.
Oh, okay.
We'll get that updated. We've made a few edits
All right.
to this policy since we put it in the packet, and that was one of the things I was going to mention to you.
Okay.
But there are 10.
Okay.
We looked at that closely today to make sure we had that accurate. We are proposing 2 new accounts. They would be general Dare County accounts. One would be Facebook, and one would be Instagram. And I believe, and I think hopefully the county manager now agrees, that having these general accounts would enable us to be more innovative and engaging with our social media, and also enable departments. There are a lot of departments that don't have a social media presence, and by having some general accounts, they'll have a presence. I think of EMS. At one time, they thought about starting a Facebook account, but once they thought about it, they didn't have really that much to post. But that's where we can fill some gaps and help those who don't have a presence to have one. So, and eventually, I'm going to be quite honest, there are some that exist that don't post a lot and that don't have many followers. So down the road, we'd also like to consolidate, and maybe some that don't need it could work into the pages that we're creating. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin, and she's going to share details about guidelines for publishing and monitoring, and then we'll open up for questions.
Okay. Good evening, Caitlin.
Good evening. Thank you very much for listening to us, Commissioners. As Dorothy mentioned, we currently have the 10 Facebook accounts right now, the most active of which is the Dare County Department of Health and Human Services. And this page actually grew from 1,318 followers on March 1st of last year to 11,998 followers on March 1st of this year.
Wow, that makes perfect sense.
It does, doesn't it? That is an almost 10,000 follower increase, and that is because it became such a vital tool for rapidly disseminating information regarding the pandemic. This tells us that social media is a viable means of communicating with our residents and property owners, and that we should be utilizing it. We would like to build a Dare County Government Facebook page and a Dare County Government Instagram account in order to serve as general platforms for distributing information about safety and education within the county. Some of the information we'd like to share is Public Works collection schedule disruptions and revisions, county project updates, such as the Dare County COA campus. Updates on the construction of that progress would be great to share on that platform. Hurricane and evacuation notices, because social media is such a great tool for getting information out quickly and rapidly to our community. Parks and Recreation program information, signing up for different activities. Same thing with the Balm Center, Pheasant Center, and Dare County Center. And then finally, various notices and educational information from all of our departments, from the tax department, the water department, soil and water conservation. All of them have great educational information that we can use right now. So the content posted to the Dare County government accounts will provide unique perspectives on departmental programs and services, but there will also be guidelines and restrictions in place. Posts should always be factual and meaningful. When possible, as Dorothy mentioned, the content that we post on our social media accounts will link back to our website to get people to the accurate information and more information. And then finally, with the exception of approved share posts from some of our other official sources, all of the content and images must be the original work and property of Dare County. Getting into who will manage the accounts, social media performance and analytics should always, oops, I think I skipped a page, guys, sorry about that. The Public Relations Department currently manages the Dare County Government Twitter account, and we also oversee all of the other Dare County accounts. I will have primary responsibility for posting content on the Dare County Government Facebook and Instagram accounts, and continue to monitor all the other pages, along with Stephanie and Dorothy. We will also create a schedule and a post bank. We'll fill this up with educational information and plan it out for the month ahead of time. That way we can consistently post and ensure that we're posting a minimum of 3 times per week to keep our audience engaged. Now into the posting performance and analytics. It's very vital to measure the analytics and the performance of your Facebook page for 3 reasons. To understand who we are reaching, to ensure that the proper medium is being used, it's being used in the right way, and then also to ensure that messaging is consistent. All of the social media channels have a great back end with analytics, so we can see what kind of posts they're enjoying, what we should be posting more, how we can reach them differently. And this ensures that we are effective in our goal to promote the value and the importance of the county's programs, policies, and services. Hopefully you've had a chance to review the social media policy, and you'll see that there is a section that addresses content that is not permitted on our pages. This information is actually outlined on the About section of each social media account that we have. So rules and regulations, what is not permitted on our pages, everyone who accesses them can see that information. Some of our goals, we have 3 goals, and that is to increase public awareness of the county's programs, policies, and services, and also promote the value and importance of those services. To distribute this vital information quickly and accurately, they're getting it from us, directly from the source. And then also to maintain open, professional, and responsive communication with members of the public and also the news media. Why do followers, likes, and impressions matter to a county? We want people to attend our events and educational programs. We want them to feel positive about the community in which they live so that they are supportive of our initiatives and projects. We also want to showcase the well-rounded community in which we live. And this could appeal to industries who might be interested in bringing business to our county. Getting our information in front of our residents and property owners is important. Social media accounts offer a unique opportunity to connect, whether that's to relay specific information or just to make a positive impression. And this is what the Dare County government Facebook and Instagram accounts would provide. I'll now open the floor up to questions. Thank you for your time. Dorothy and I are here for any questions you guys might have.
Hey, I just have a curiosity. How much activity do we have Twitter-wise?
Not a lot. I think we have currently around 4,000 followers on our Twitter account, which isn't bad, but it's just not the tool that our community is using. When you look at the people who are accessing the information, we've got a lot of news and media sources, some local people, but a lot of people from out of the area. I think Facebook, we can target people a bit better in the right way, people in our community.
So how quick are we to react to somebody that posts and doesn't meet that criteria?
We actually can assign filters on the pages. So we have a profanity filter. So if there's any sort of profanity, it's automatically filtered out. And no one can actually post on the pages aside from Dorothy, Stephanie, and myself.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Who can actually put something
Right.
on that page?
Yeah.
And as long as it's you 3,
Right.
then I feel a
Exactly.
lot better.
Right.
Now,
had this
people from the
image of-
public can comment on a post, so people can comment on some of our posts. We would have that open. But again, we could have certain words filtered out and profanity filters. And then, of course, we'd be monitoring it regularly.
It'd be just like, I'll use The Voice as an example. They post an article, and then you can make a comment. And ours would work in the same principle.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
But those comments are within the criteria that are set for commenting.
Right.
So we're coming into Facebook age late in the game, obviously. Lots of places have Facebook, lots of counties have Facebook. And I'll have to say that the reason that we're so late coming in has mostly been concerns that I've had for a while about whether we should do this and how would we do it and all of those things. How do we monitor it? When we started looking at it, there were 2 people in the office. Well, Dorothy and her team were stretched thin. We didn't really have the ability to monitor it. And so if we weren't going to monitor it, in my mind, it wasn't a good idea to have it because we couldn't control the kind of things that you were going to be concerned about because we wouldn't be monitoring it. Archiving it, I was concerned because once you put it out there, it's a public record. We got to have the ability to archive it, and we were searching for ways to archive it properly. Comments, how do we control? This isn't designed to be the political forum, and so we've got controls if we think in about the comments and what they're supposed to be and all that. to try to control that. There are other places to do that. This isn't what we intend this to be. And then it's also not the place to question and answer. As we've seen with the Avon project, I've spent a tremendous amount of time responding to emails and questions that we needed to respond to in that forum for that purpose. But there'd be no way that we could keep up and monitor all the Facebook traffic that might be out there and respond to all those questions. And so that was a concern to me. Caitlin came on board and resolved some of the monitoring issues because it increased Dorothy's staff. It's a great communication tool, and they told you the statistics of how people get information, and we're missing that if we don't do it. We resolved most of my concerns. There's going to be Facebook comments that we may or may not like. That's the nature of the beast, and we just have to accept that if we're going to use this medium to go out. And then, most importantly, it's the communication tool and the analytics that she can do on that can tell us if we're getting our message out, where we're getting it to, and if we're not, where we need to be getting it to. And so those are all important as we go forward. And so I think that the concerns that we have and the hiccups that are going to occur are probably worth it in terms of the good that we can do and the information that we can get out and get out quickly. And so, and then finally, consolidating all of our Facebook. We had 10 people that were kind of randomly doing Facebook. We're bringing that under one umbrella now. It all has to be looked at by Dorothy and Caitlin and their team to be sure that we're sending the same message, that it's one county, one operation, that we're doing things the right way, and we don't have one place saying one thing and conflicting with something we're saying somewhere else. And so having that control makes it all right too. And so when you put all that together, the work that they've done at least alleviates my concerns as much as they can be alleviated. And I think that with that said, I gave them the go-ahead to bring this to you all as a way that we probably need to move in that direction.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions of Dorothy or Caitlin?
Yeah, I've got one question. On Facebook in particular, you can actually boost a post by paying, it's a small fee, but still it's money that you have to pay. We will not be doing that, correct?
We may, with different events, and we would have that in our advertising budget, so that we didn't meet that this year, so we would have that money theoretically to apply. Next year, we would kind of allocate some of that money to some ads for different events that we know we've struggled to get participation at in the past. I think it would be a great tool for that.
So, really,
how do we use this tool for visitors? I mean, we have traditionally had the same kind of markets and demographics coming here. Now we've got people who are coming here who couldn't name the villages that they just went through. They're first timers.
So you can chime in, Dorothy, but we put out lots of information, but we only really put it out in two mediums. We put it out on our Facebook page, and we put it out in current TV in different ways. And so what we're going to be doing is putting out essentially the same information that we've always put out, but we're going to broaden our reach because Facebook will reach so many more people than either of those mediums reach. And so it's to put out the message of the county. It's not an advertising forum for tourism or whatever. It's to put out the things that we think the public needs to know about what we're doing, from events and festivals to large item pickup to emergency management, you name it. We put all that out now, but we reach only the segment that look at those two sources. By adding all of these other sources, we've broadened our reach tremendously, and we hope that we can get more people, more engagement, more understanding in the community of what we're doing on all of those things.
Commissioner Couch, to your point, I think the Visitors Bureau is, I mean, they have humongous following, and they appeal to the visitors. I see our pages more for the people who live here and work here and own property here. But there is we're all seeing it. People that own property here are starting to think, wow, this is a great place to live. So I think there is an opportunity for some lifestyle type posting, that kind of love where you live. I mean, let's face it, we have an incredible lifestyle here. And I do think that's something that we can mix into it. But I see the Visitors Bureau as that visitor. But certainly, if you think there's some ways that we can use it with the geography and to help people understand, I think the history is an incredible part of who we are. And I would see us making some posts that reference the history.
The other thing is, the things that, just use large item pickup. Someone out of town who doesn't follow our webpage religiously won't know that. But if they're on our Facebook page, they see that every day, and the post will come up, and they'll get it, and they'll know. We have links in our GIS that will tell you where the dog parks are. Well, if we've got something going out in that Facebook page, and they'll know to link to that GIS, and they can find the dog park or the driver's license bureau or a number of other things that we have layered in our GIS that unless you're on our webpage, you won't get. But in our social media presence, when that stuff goes out, Dorothy said earlier that it links back to our webpage, it directs them where they can get that, and it brings to their attention that they might need to look at that. And so, people stay on Facebook, as you know, all the time. They don't stay on on our webpage all the time. And so we're going to reach a lot more with the things that we do and that we need to get to, and our communication will improve tremendously.
All right. Commissioner Baker.
I agree with what you guys are doing, and thank you for all your hard work bringing this thing together. I just want to throw out that, this is a double-edged sword that we're getting into. The time when you put the post out there, you think everybody's going to possibly love. All of a sudden, you're going to have 5 people that come and completely blast you and then share it with 500 people of their nearest Facebook friends over something that you thought you were doing really, really good. And we've done it in the restaurant business with a special we did one time. And it just came back. I told my girl that does all our Facebook stuff, I said, I don't want to hear the post like that. I don't want negativity. I've got on this thing as a tool to expand my business, to get the word out. I want it to be used as that, not as a sounding board for someone who had a bad day because the sun didn't shine and it rained. And so we need to be really careful about monitoring those things because it will come back on that other side of the sword with you.
You're right.
Your concern was my concern. They told me I was old and I needed to get with the times.
Well, listen, I'm old. I'm old too, but I live in the jungle, and I deal with it every day.
But what they really said was that debate goes on Facebook, whether we're on Facebook or not. And if we're going to we're not going to stop that debate. It's happening right now as we speak. Will continue to happen, and we're not going to stop that from happening. And us not being on Facebook doesn't resolve any of that, but it eliminates that communication tool. So basically, we're going to create the communication tool, and yeah, we'll get negative stuff on there. We can't help it. That's what Facebook seems to be, but we'll also get our message out.
I have one comment. Dorothy, I think that we should get the county manager a TikTok account.
Yeah, on that. I will resist.
All right. Anyone else have any questions of Dorothy?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to approve the social media use guidelines and policies.
May I request that you all accept it with a few minor revisions that were made?
With a few minor revisions.
It's nothing of substance. We need to correct the 10.
You correct the one.
And then there was a reference to images, and then we had to add Flickr to our list on the last page. So they're very minor edits, but
Is the maker of the motion willing to accept that?
I am willing to accept that.
Okay, so the maker of the motion, Mr. House, has suggested, has made a motion to approve and update the policy, social media use guidelines and policy presented this evening by our Public Information Officer on March the 15th, 2021 with some revisions. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Bateman. The floor is open for discussion for further comments. Hearing none, those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Good job.
Ms. Hester.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Well done.
Well done.
Chairman, that brings us to item 8 on the agenda. Gosh, I don't know how long ago it was, a lot of meetings ago. We hired, I think at that time it was Aptum, to come in and do a dredge and material placement project study for us. Aptum is, Ken and his group have now become Coastal Protection and Engineering of North Carolina. But they are here Ken's here tonight to present what they found and to talk to you about that and ask whatever questions you have about material placement going forward.
All right.
Ken, how the heck are you?
Doing well. Happy to be up here.
Yeah,
I was
been a
back
while.
there sitting trying to figure out when it was, but
I know.
I'm sure it was pre-pandemic. So
Yes, it was.
The whole world has changed since the last
Just trying
time
to
I
find
saw.
us on Twitter.
That's right.
Find us on Twitter.
Follow us. It's been a fun study to put this document together. Just a ton of information. It'll take you guys a long time to read through this thing, and I think we set it out, and we'll talk a little bit about how it's structured as more of a reference document. But I mean, at the end of the day, we had some very specific purposes and goals of this thing, and I think we've satisfied those. And so tonight, I want to, I know. Commissioner Tobin and Commissioner Couch have both been following this as it's going on from the Oregon Inlet Task Force and the Dare County Waterways Commission. Brent's been really involved in the study, but for you all and also for anybody that's watching, just to kind of give you like the Cliff Notes version of how this thing's laid out, and then you guys can dive into your specific areas and figure this thing out. But I do want to spend a few minutes tonight kind of going over these recommendations. It was a lot of information to kind of for us to digest and for us to organize. And so we've laid out these 8 different recommendations in a fair amount of detail in the general report. And I want to kind of overview those for you tonight and just give you all an opportunity to ask any questions about those. So real quick, we'll go over the review of the goals of the project. I'll talk a little bit about how this thing is laid out. The report's, as I said, it's a pretty large report. It's about 85 pages long. But I'll just give you a brief overview of how it's laid out, which will help you dive into it. And then we'll spend a few minutes on these recommendations. So the goals of the project way back a year plus ago when the world was a different place, we set out to provide additional capacity for maintenance of federal and non-federal navigation channels throughout the county. So the Corps had approached the county on numerous occasions, said there were issues, there were specific channels where they were running out of capacity, so we wanted to find some additional capacity. But we didn't just want to, go in and do things the way they had always been done. We wanted to put a stress on trying to find alternatives that would enhance coastal resilience, figure out ways of beneficially using this material. So that was a big focus of the study. The first part of the study was basically finding all the information that was out there. A lot of this information comes from the Corps of Engineers. So conducting this needs assessment, figuring out where the channels are, how much volume comes out of it, how frequently they're dredged, what's the type of material in those channels. And that was kind of step one. And then the next step of the process, the goal of the process, was to provide you all with some short-term recommendations and some big picture long-term recommendations of how you might move forward with some of these alternatives in the long run. And then ultimately, part of the contract that was awarded to our firm was to move forward a certain number of these short-term alternatives and actually get some permits in place so that for the short term, you all had some additional capacity. All right, and so the report layout, after you get through the short introduction section, basically we detail this needs assessment. We talk about how we found the data, how we acquired it, how we looked at it. There's some really great tables in there that kind of walk you through dredge frequency, the volume that comes out of that, what would 20 years of capacity for a particular channel look like, the type of material that's in there. So that kind of takes you through the needs assessment. And then when you get into this concept alternative, I think that's section 3 of the report, there are 22 different concepts that were laid out in this report, and that's one of the reasons why it's so long, to get through those concepts, spanning from building new bird islands to new confined disposal facilities to thin layer placement options, to using the new private-public partnership dredge that's being built that'll come online, and how that can be used to defer some of the maintenance on these different channels. And then the final section, or I'm sorry, the fourth section is this alternative screening. So we've got, imagine we've got 22 different alternatives, and how do we wrap our head around weighing these different 22 alternatives? It doesn't all come down to cost or the ability to permit. So we created sort of this creative matrix that you can comparatively look at different options and kind of rack and stack those options based on whether or not you're worried about cost or permitting, or whether you need to acquire easements, or how many cost-sharing partners you might be able to bring into specific alternatives. And that's all laid out in that alternative alternative screening section. And then the final section gets into the recommendations. So the recommendations, essentially we developed a number of short-term and long-term strategies. We obviously utilized all the information, the needs assessment information, the screening matrix, a lot of feedback from different stakeholders. As I mentioned, we've briefed the Waterways Commission a number of times. We've briefed the Oregon Inlet Task Force a number of times. Brent's my best friend back there. We talk 2 or 3 times a week on different ideas. So lots of input from the county. There's a section in the needs assessment talks about different stakeholder groups that we've reached out to get information to develop these recommendations. And so we came up with 8 different recommendations, and if I remember these slides correctly, yeah. So we'll go through a couple of different slides that kind of outline each of these recommendations. So the very first recommendation is essentially for the county commission to move forward and pursue the permitting of these short-term alternatives, okay? So geographically, it gets into kind of how we paid for the project. Geographically, there's a central Dare County region, which essentially is everything that connects to Oregon Inlet plus Stumpy Point. And then we've got a southern Dare County section, which is essentially everything south of Oregon Inlet, Rodanthe, and all of the channels down around Hatteras Village. And so recommendation number 1, and that's actually one of the things we'd like to come out of this presentation is an approval to move forward on recommendation number 1, would be to get permits in place for the modification of Island H, which is the big confined disposal facility right outside of Wanchese. We've got a couple of ideas about how to modify that, potentially raising the dikes, potentially opening it up and pushing some of that material out. We've got really good numbers from the Corps of Engineers on what they need to achieve capacity for one more dredging event. And that's really what we've targeted for this Island H. We realize it's not a long-term commitment. It is filled to its capacity, but there's a few tweaks that could be made to it to potentially use it one more time that gets us past the short term, and then we think about the long term. Establish some additional bird islands over there near Old House Channel. That gives some additional capacity that may not be the very top of the priority of what the Corps of Engineers needs right now, but there's a lot of data that's been developed, environmental data, actually physical setting data for that area, and we feel like we can leverage that information that's already available, that the Corps has done a lot of these investigations, and actually move forward and get some permits in place for that.
Ken,
Yes, sir.
Well, on the Island H,
yes,
you said it's reaching its capacity. You might be able to do one more. What are the limiting factors on that? Is it just surface area, height, combination of the two? What is it?
Correct. So obviously it's kind of a bowl on the inside, and there is an area that can be calculated within that bowl. And when the Corps is pumping into that bowl, if you will, with one of these larger pipeline dredges, most of the material that's being pumped in there is water, and then there's a certain amount that's sand that falls out. Well, through their experience, the way that they handle this is essentially they want about 2 times the volume of sand or material, a sediment that they want to pump in there. If they want to pump 100,000 cubic yards in there. They want enough area to be able to pump 200,000 yards of slurry in there. And they know that, you know, the dewatering process through that they can kind of manage it there, and it's not constant shutdowns from the dredge. And then they also have a 2-foot freeboard around the entire thing that in the middle of a storm, or in the middle of a dredging event where this thing's all the way filled up, if there was some sort of a huge rain event that added, you know, 18 inches of water on top of it, that it's still not overtopping, and you're not worried about you know, scour as things start to leak out of there. So that's how they've determined what the capacity is. There are so little capacity that they know that using that formula, they can only place, you know, 40,000, 50,000 cubic yards in that hole.
How is the bowl generated?
It was originally generated by constructing dikes around that area. So it would have been, you know, probably flat marsh back in the very beginning when that thing was constructed. And
so what reason can you not continue to do that?
There are some considerations from Wildlife Resources Commission where they have some limits. There's also, you know, engineering limits as to how high you want to make these dikes before they become unstable. You'd obviously you would want to keep the top of those dikes at a certain width so that you can get, you know, earth-moving equipment around it. So in order to maintain that and have the right slope coming down on the inside, unless you start expanding it outward, essentially the higher you go, the smaller you're making the inside opening. Right. So there's those factors that the Corps of Engineers has wrestled with over time.
Thank you.
Sure. One of the other short-term alternatives is looking at something down at Stumpy Point. We've got this experience now with the Manio project that's finishing up out there, this bucket and barge project that's been fairly successful handling this finer grain material. The Corps dredges the outer portion of Stumpy Point, but once you get into where it meets the ferry terminal, the Corps doesn't do any dredging further into that and into the boat basin. And so there is an interest in trying to maintain that a little deeper than what it is right now. And we've talked about a couple of alternatives and a permitting process that we may be able to move that forward. There's a small plot that's owned by Dare County down there. There's another plot that's privately owned that property owners expressed some interest in working with us to come up with a plan there. So that's one that we would say pursue in the short term. Open water disposal.
Ken, let me, let's go back if you don't mind. What's the 3.15, the 3. What does that represent? 3.15 what?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So it's in the document.
I hadn't been reading.
In the document in section 3, which is where all of these different alternatives are laid out. If you wanted to find the Stumpy Point Harbor description, you would go to section 3, alternative number 15. So it's alternative 3.15.
Yeah, I'm reading 3.12 right now to get more detail
it's
on this.
Comprehensive, man. Good luck.
Very good.
Open water.
To open water disposal in areas of previously authorized dredging. So specifically, there are a couple of areas that the Corps of Engineers has authorization to bottom dump, to place sediment. In these deep channels, as you come up from Hell's Gate towards the bridge, there are sections that are naturally, 20 feet, 22 feet in that section. And recently, the Corps has been authorized to do it for a long time. Recently, the Corps has had some discussions with the agencies about actually doing it, and the Corps has been doing it on a limited basis. So basically developing a concept where if certain thresholds are met, that either the Corps dredge or when the private-public partnership dredge comes online, you see that reference to the PPP dredge. That's how we refer to it in the report. Once that dredge comes online, that you would have permits to be able to potentially take material from the entrance channel at Wanchese and drive it down there and potentially place it in those scour holes or any other hot spot that you might have between Manio all the way down to the bridge, potentially being able to place it in those areas. So that's 3.12. Dredging of channels with the private-public partnership dredge. Basically every channel that we cover in the report, we're looking to have permits in place so that when that dredge comes online, that dredge can remove material from those channels, and there would be specific designated areas, whether they're areas where there are already permits in place to dump, or part of this short-term process, we're getting new locations to place that material, that private-public partnership dredge could come in there and remove material. And then the last one that's in the central Dare County project area is the restoration of Green Island. Green Island is kind of it's a bird island. It's a low elevation island just inside of the new bridge. It's sort of a little bit further to the south, closer to the Pea Island side. If you went out there today on a boat, you probably wouldn't see anything exposed out of the water there. But it's something to where if we had permits in place, you could pump material to this island and restore it, build up the elevation over time, the way that some of these other islands are managed by the Corps of Engineers and Wildlife Resources Commission. And the reason we threw this in there is that in going through the stakeholder exercise, there's a lot of interest on the part of National Park Service, Wildlife Resources Commission, the Nature Conservancy, Coastal Federation. A lot of groups want to see the restoration of Green Island. And so we think it's a low threshold to move through the permitting process. And although it's hard to identify specifically how that island might be used in the short term, having that permit in place and having another tool in the toolbox, we just believe that that it could only benefit the county of having that option in the future. And then moving down in the southern part of the project area, down around Hatteras Island, there are two primary alternatives that we're looking at down there. One would be to try to permit additional open water disposal for the special purpose dredge or the private-public partnership dredge. This would be different than 3.12 that Chairman or Commissioner Ross just mentioned. This would be areas that are not currently authorized, but that we've looked at through this study, and we think that we should pursue these because that really opens up the potential of, in the short term, dredging out Rollinson Channel and placing that material somewhere to get a little bit more depth through Rollinson Channel. We looked at a lot of different alternatives down there as far as what to do with this fine-grained material in Rollinson Channel. And none of the alternatives that we identify a lot of alternatives, but none of them are something that we would characterize as short-term alternatives. These are things that are going to take a lot of environmental review, a lot of documentation to get them pushed through and permitted. And so we've put this other option of identifying some areas that are essentially further out in the sound as potential disposal options and trying to get permits to do that. And then the last one for the southern Dare County is the same as what we mentioned in the central part, essentially getting permits in place for all of the channels to be able to use that new dredge when it comes online and have disposal options that can be managed by or that can be used by that new dredge when it comes online.
Ken, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with Craney Island?
Yes. Up near Norfolk?
Yeah. No, it's in Portsmouth. It's
okay.
Area. Is that wishful thinking that we could potentially do something like that instead of all of these sites?
Yeah, I mean,
it's 2 miles out, 2 miles across, 2 miles in, and they've been doing that for 30 years.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges with something like that is the economics. So some of the alternatives that we looked at do look at building something like Island H, out, whether it's connected to the mainland or whether it's, out in the water. And the amount of material, you've got to have the right material to be able to build those dikes up and, even if they're low dikes, to start containing it. And, they're with the sediment data that we have right now, there's uncertainty as to whether or not that material is here, locally, or will we have to truck it in, which really drives the cost up. We've talked to some folks about using geotextile tubes, and maybe even if the material's not compatible, you pump it in this tube, and the tube gives it some rigidity that maybe you can start building the foundation of those with something like that. So up there where you're talking about, where they're maintaining, the port of Norfolk and, the channel coming into the Chesapeake Bay,
Right.
I mean, the economics are so huge up there that they can justify all sorts of construction costs like that. Real estate's an issue down here as well. I mean, talked to the National Park Service about potentially using some of their areas. We've talked to, we've identified some, privately owned areas that you could potentially do something like that. So it's a combination of the economics and the real estate that makes that kind of challenging.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Ken, you talked about doing some of these and making bird islands and that kind of thing. So we spend the money to get permits, we do all the work to get a bird island. The birds come and then they say, now you can't use the island because you got the birds on it. How do we avoid that loop?
Yeah, I think through the process, we would need to establish what the purpose and needs of these projects are, and it's a balancing act because some of these agencies will they'll try to claim that the purpose and need is that it's a bird island because it's less it's less adversarial to move that through the process. But when the final product comes out of the permit, you've got all sorts of conditions there that the purpose and needs was to provide habitat for these birds. And so you've got a lot of conditions that need to satisfy that. Whereas if we're clear that the purpose and need is for dredge disposal, yet we will abide by certain reasonable conditions in terms of the maximum height, or maybe there's some management needs out there from once in a while if you've got to clear the vegetation or something like that. So it's about establishing some clear purpose and needs up front and making sure that what you're building is a place that you need to put material that you're going to try to make as nice for birds as possible, as opposed to first and foremost it's a bird habitat. All right. This is just kind of a summary in terms of that recommendation number 1. So one of the things I want to stress is part of the contract that we were awarded was to move forward with this. So the scope of work and the scope of work involved in advancing these alternatives that I just spent a few minutes talking about, those are included in the existing contract. There is no additional appropriation of funds on the part of the county to move that forward. Once notice to proceed is issued, we hold an interagency meeting. We've got a lot more information now than we had the first time we talked to the agencies about the details of these specifics. We anticipate about 14 to 18 months to be able to move forward with this particular alternative, which includes numerous permits for numerous different facilities. And then there's a number of environmental documents that need to be written, and then some of the alternatives would require additional sediment sampling, and that kind of throws us into this alternative recommendation number 2. Recommendation number 2, essentially, we were able to get all of this Corps of Engineers VibraCore data, sediment data that they have from these past channels, and they've got a lot of good data down in the southern part of the county. In fact, they just awarded a contract to a VibraCore contractor that's going to be taking some samples up in Barney Slough and Sloop Channel. They may actually be on site now or this week. But in the northern part of the project area, closer to Oregon Inlet, especially the ranges that go up through the main trunk line from Oregon Inlet, Old House Channel, all the way up to Manio, that data either doesn't exist anymore, or like the documentation on that data it's so general that we wouldn't be able to pursue permits to do some of these other things with that type of material, because we just don't know what % fines the material is, and we don't know the color of the material, we don't know the mineralogy of the material. So it's been asked to me a number of times in some of the Waterway Commission meetings, well, the Corps has been doing it forever. Why would we need to take new cores? The situation is that we're trying to get new permits for something, and in order for us to justify these new permits, that that the material is compatible to use with whatever we're saying we want to use it for, we're going to have to prove to them that material is compatible. And in the northern part of the county, the data that the Corps has available is not sufficient to make that case. And so under recommendation 2, there's a couple of different tables that kind of lay out the areas that we think are priority locations where some additional cores should be taken. We've recommended taking a couple of cores up on Island H to understand the type of material that's there, so that if we are going to make some of these modifications, that we can justify those modifications, both from an environmental and from an engineering standpoint. We've got some contingencies in there that if we get into Stumpy Point or Wanchese or something like that, where the agencies are asking for contaminant testing, that we're able to take, we've got that sediment and we can run those through those tests as well. So essentially recommendation number 2 is to move forward with conducting the sediment sampling. I'd say that recommendation number 1, I said that, there isn't an additional allocation of funds to start moving forward with that. But in our opinion, these VibraCore data are going to be necessary to move that process all the way forward.
Likelihood is going to be that they're going to ask for them regardless.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
What's the approximate cost of all this VibraCore data?
The ones that we've delineated as priority VibraCores, I think it's around 100,000. Brent, does that sound right? I know we've kind of sliced and diced them in a couple different ways, but
130 plus a 30 for battery.
130 plus.
No, it's just 130.
Okay. Okay. And that includes the that includes the 5 for the Hatteras Ocean Bar. Okay. All right. All right.
Ken, while we're on this subject of doing core samples and this sort of thing, to determine what the dirt's suitable for. And reading through this, I know you showed the Fort Raleigh area, Lost Colony. And when you have an escarpment that's like that is now, why does it matter? Because it's going to be in the parking lot before we can turn around real good. There'll be no parking lot. Why does, I understand that it matters, but in a situation like that, when any kind of dirt seems like would help, is there just no wiggle room in that sort of thing? Or
Yeah,
what?
I mean, up there it gets even more complicated because Park Service is probably going to have their. I mean, if they make a determination that they're the only thing that they're concerned about is protecting the infrastructure that's up there, and they want to stop that erosional scarp. Then they may be willing to place different material out there. But anytime you're placing below the water line, the agencies have the ability to say no. This is going to create too much too much turbidity in the water, or that this is too unlike the native sediments that are there, and you're going to harm whatever is below the water. So as long as, I mean, if you're really talking about kind of putting in almost like a beach fill, where it's not just you're not just piling up a bunch of sand right there at the escarpment. If you could keep it above the water line, maybe you have a few more options on the type of material that you're going to use. But I think what they're proposing is, making it more of a natural beach type environment there, or natural shoreline that you would see in that area prior to that erosional scarp. And so I believe both the agencies, and particular for that alternative, the Park Service is also going to be real interested in, what is this material? I mean, if it's the same material that's coming out of the Shallowbag Bay project right now, that's got just a lot of clay in it. I mean, I don't think that's probably it. Even from an engineering standpoint, it's not going to help very much. It's just going to slough off back in. So.
Thank you.
Sure. So recommendation number 3 deals with a bunch of the alternatives. One of we were just talking about, this Fort Raleigh shoreline up there. So in going through some of the alternatives, alternative 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.5, they're all essentially up in that northern Roanoke Island area. And some of the alternatives deal with trying to build, new bird islands in a linear fashion out in front of that to act as a wave break. And some of the projects, I mean, in theory, they're good concepts. They can be done, but in order to permit those types of alternatives, I think that both from an environmental standpoint and an engineering standpoint, numerical modeling would really help make those decisions. And so to come up here and just say, hey, we recommended more work and we're great at doing it, give us the contract. Like, that wasn't the intention of recommendation number 3. If you read the whole thing, it talks about if you were to set one of these models up, there are a number of other communities in the area, Manio, Nags Head, potentially even over the community over at Mans Harbor, other places in Dare County, the Park Service could benefit not only on these alternatives, but in other ways in the future, having this model to be able to look at different alternatives of how to manage, sea level rise and things like that, climate change. And so we also looked at, who are other collaborative partners. We talked to Reed Corbett at CSI. He's real interested. He's got a number of, pretty cool toys and some good students that can collect data and things like that. So it's more of a, if any of these alternatives interest you, you may want to move in this direction, and there are some partnerships that you could form to help you advance these particular alternatives.
Ken, go back. When you refer to the spit adjacent to Andy Griffin, is that better known as Banana Island?
I've heard that a couple of times. I think, was it
It
Harry
is.
that brought it up? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can call it that in the final report.
No, but I mean, is that area,
Yeah.
Jim?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's hugely popular.
Well,
Hugely popular.
Bob, in this list too, where it says open water disposal north of Roanoke Island.
Right.
There's actually a very large pile of tires
Yeah, from years
north
ago.
of the channel that were put out there years and years and
Right.
years and years ago. And one of the ideas that we've kicked around is actually capping those tires
Right.
with sediment.
Oh, okay.
And making more of a reef out there instead of just having a bunch of old rubber tires.
Yeah, yeah. Makes sense. Absolutely.
All right. Recommendation number 4, part of the needs assessment, we developed sort of an internal GIS, and then we put it online, and Brent was able to use it, and some of the other folks in the county were able to use it to look at, where all this data is, what are some of the environmental data we use to figure out, to prioritize the areas that we wanted to look at. And it ended up, through the study, becoming a pretty useful tool. All of the channels are in there. You can click on the channels. You can see all of those tables that I talked about earlier, where it has the frequency of dredging, the type of material, that's all in that GIS. And so we put this recommendation in here that either, an outside firm or using county resources to try to create this as more of a long-term tool to use for management purposes. One would be, basically to be able to track in real time. When the Corps of Engineers does a new survey and throws it on their site, this site would pull that down, and then the manager would be able to click on a specific channel and know how much material is in that channel, not have to ask somebody, an engineer or a CAD person or something to go ahead and compute it. They would know how much material is in that channel up to the authorized depth. The other thing is you can, we've developed some statistics based on the data that we were able to get from the Corps of Engineers, but 10 years from now, if you take all of the projects that are done by the Corps, or the Corps subs out to pipeline contractors, or that you all are doing, and all that gets fed into this database, then your statistics become even better to be able to predict in the future. And so it's something that Brent and I talked about, that we talked about internally with our team. And actually just last week, we had a really good call with the county's GIS department. And I think it seems like they have the capabilities in-house to be able to do this. So we're kind of looking at a transition period over the next couple of months, get some more direction. But I think the county will be able to manage that. And that should be a real powerful tool for folks like Brent that are managing this stuff on a day-to-day basis.
Your modeling goes in there too. It can be just another aspect of it that is
just
huge
storing
resource.
all that information. Yep. All right, recommendation number 5. There were a number of different alternatives that deal with confined disposal facilities. So this is similar to Island H. So we identified essentially 3 of them. One would be some private land that's over there north of Wanchese off of Tillett Road. One would be sort of across the waterway on National Park Service land. And then one is further down in the southern part of the county near where the breach occurred during Hurricane Isabel. And so we've got a lot of information about how much volume and some estimates on cost and things like that in the report that deal with that. But those are some of those alternatives that are going to take a lot of effort to try to advance. Those are seen as more long-term solutions. And so this recommendation in particular says that if you all, once you're able to digest this report, if you all believe that you want to pursue some of these long-term alternatives with having a confined disposal facility at your fingertips, that there are some things that you can do sort of incrementally to move that process forward. So there's some site development that would need to be done to look at, are there wetlands on these sites? Where are the wetlands? Where could something like this be actually sited on a particular property? Are there SAVs that'll be impacted over there? Do we have the data, the survey data that we need to actually come up with a design so that we can accurately estimate the cost of something like this and present it to the agencies? Geotechnical, is there sediment on site that can be used to construct these things, or will we have to truck it in? That all goes to being able to accurately estimate the cost. So recommendation 5 basically talks about if we're going to move forward with these CDFs, some of these alternatives, that these are some next steps that need to be taken. That's not going to break the bank, but those types of investigations would need to be taken as a next step to figure out how viable those are in the long term. Alternative 6 and Alternative 7 essentially make some recommendations as to funding some of these projects over the long haul. Number 6 deals with the Corps of Engineers continued authority program. So the marsh restoration project that's inside of the breakwaters right there at Wanchese, at the entrance to Wanchese, that's one of these Section 204 projects. It's essentially done by the Corps. The Corps has this continued authority to be able to do these projects, but it's a federal project. It takes a long time to get through. There's limited money in the beginning, so it's somewhat competitive. But there are a number of good reasons why some of the alternatives in here would align with other sort of overarching goals of the Corps of Engineers, from thin layer placement to habitat recreation, and generally this CAP 206 or CAP 204, I'm sorry, is used for advancing beneficial use projects. So there are a number of different alternatives that we listed there, and in that actual section we describe in detail why we think that some of these CAP 204 projects might work. We actually contacted one of the guys that works up at the Norfolk district during the study, and they've actually just moved through a couple of thin layer placement projects up there where they were able to have the Corps of Engineers move through all of the environmental documentation process. I mean, it took 2 or 3 years to get through it, but it was 100% federally funded to at least get all of the information you would need to have to be able to permit something like thin layer placement. Now they're looking for, now they've done this study, and now they need a cost sharing partner that's going to share with the Corps' maintenance operation and actually do some of this thin layer placement, and they're still shopping that around. But if you came to the table saying, hey, if we can get this thing permitted, federal government's going to pay for the permitting of it, and tell us what the delta cost is when it's time to do this thin layer placement, and we'll see if we can afford it, then that looks like something that's positive on a number of fronts in the future.
Is the thin layer study that they did up there transferable?
I mean, it's going to be transferable for the federal agencies. The state agencies aren't going to see it as transferable. I mean, certainly the science is transferable, but in terms of satisfying all the requirements of the Division of Coastal Management, some of the state agencies would be different. Similar to 6, 7 is essentially coordinating with state and Corps of Engineers on other types of beneficial use pilot projects. Sort of sounds like the same thing that I just talked about, but essentially WRDA 26, the Water Resource Development Act that the Corps passes every couple of years that authorizes all sorts of federal projects. There was a special stipulation put in the 2016 authorization that said Congress is interested in advancing at least 10 projects where we're beneficially using dredge sediment for something that the Corps isn't already doing. In 2018, Congress liked that rule so much that they increased it from 10 to 20. And then the new WRDA that was just passed a few months ago increased that number from 20 to 35. So Congress has said, we want 35 of these projects authorized, but Congress hasn't appropriated funds to build these 35 projects. They just say, this is a great idea.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So, without wasting a bunch of time and saying this is kind of pie in the sky, the reason that we include this in there is that there are some recent studies done by the Corps of Engineers through what they're doing in the South Atlantic Division, which is essentially everything in the Caribbean and from Florida all the way up to North Carolina, Virginia border. Actually, I think it goes around into the Gulf to some extent as well. So that district of the Corps that's managing that area, they're doing this comprehensive regional study right now, and and one of the things that they found is that particularly when they look at navigation projects in the Wilmington district, there's a lot of fine-grained material that needs to be dredged out of these channels that the Corps maintains with the Wilmington district, and that there aren't enough options to be able to deal with these types of sediment. And so they specifically call out things like thin layer placement, things like open water dispersal, where maybe you've got a big sound and you can determine a specific area where that material can be taken out there and placed and dumped. It helps if you've got a big deep hole. But they've done some of these projects recently. The Corps has moved forward on some thin layer placement and some open water dispersal, as they called it. And it's sort of like, we put it in there because it's sort of ripe on things that the Corps is being told they need to focus more on. And so you've got this beneficial use pilot project out there, which is somewhat of an unfunded endeavor, but you've got a lot of strong cases to be made with the types of projects you're trying to push, as well as some partnerships to develop to try to advance that particular alternative. So it's laid out in pretty good detail in the report, and be happy to take any questions on that. The final recommendation essentially has to deal specifically with Rodanthe Harbor. The CDF down there, it's basically ready to take material if you were to do a dredge project down there. But we recommended sort of a long-term management plan that would look at one, having some agreements in place that when that material is pumped in and it's now filled to capacity, that you have an established way of mining that material out and getting it out to whomever is using it, and potentially get some money out of that process as well. And then the other thing is potentially adding some recreational benefit down there. There are a couple of different grants through the Division of Coastal Management where you could provide some additional waterfront access or recreational access down there. But what it may do is, potentially building a pier over top of the outfall pipe that's down there that gets all busted up in some of these storms. Potentially something like that with leveraging the grant funding and being able to provide, additional improvement on the infrastructure that goes into that facility. Those are the types of things that we laid out there in recommendation number 8. So, talked a long time, but I did want to spend some good time on those recommendations, make sure you all understand them, make sure that they're clear, and then answer any questions that you all have.
Okay, Ken, thank you so much. Any questions of Ken concerning this presentation?
Just one.
Go ahead, Commissioner Ross.
If we had a magic wand, because what it sounds like we're doing is planning for the next 20 years of taking sand that's going to wash in from the Atlantic Ocean, fill up Oregon Inlet. We're going to get boats to dig the sand that washed in, and we're going to have to go find some place to dump it. Have I basically summarized the problem?
Yeah, I mean, Oregon, believe it or not, Oregon Inlet isn't a huge focus in this, because Oregon Inlet, I mean, there isn't a need for where to place the material that's dredged out of Oregon Inlet. It's mostly these interior channels where we're dealing with, much finer grained sediment that.
So within the sound, they're shifting from storms and or tides. It just shifts the bottom of the sand around in the sound.
Correct.
Rob, one thing you need to realize that all the major rivers in North Carolina feed our sounds.
Yes.
And all that silt that's washed out.
Yes,
the entire
comes
length.
in.
So our sounds are basically kind of almost, for the lack of a better term, a big delta.
Right.
Of silt from that. So when you start looking at the sediments, It's not the ocean sediments.
That's
It's.
what I was
it's-
getting
it's
confused on, Jim. Thank you.
Very,
This
very
is very
different.
helpful.
Like Ken said, the sediments coming out of Shallowbag Bay, there's a ton of clay underneath the sands.
Yeah.
There's a ton of movement, period.
Yeah.
In the sound. It's not a docile body of water
So
that
that-
people think.
Yeah.
That sediment that they dredge is not compatible. You couldn't take it and put it on Pea Island. They wouldn't allow it.
See, this is actually very helpful to an uninitiated observer like myself. Just the global explanation that you and Danny provided in the last minute and a half was very helpful, because I kept picturing all this sand coming in from the Atlantic as opposed to the Delta from all the rivers emptying the Sound and the need to maintain navigable channels within the Sound. And
It's a
where then-
challenge.
Yeah, that sounds like the challenge, right?
Correct.
Okay. That's actually very helpful. Thank you, guys.
Ken, in that regard, the sediment that Jim's talking about that's coming from the rivers forever, did that sediment, all or any part of it, go out of Oregon Inlet on an outgoing tide?
I mean, whatever is, whatever is suspended and is still in the water column when it's flowing out, I'm sure there's I mean, you can probably look at aerial photos and see the discoloration of the water on an outgoing tide. Some of that material is going out, but some of the sand from the ocean side is coming in as well.
Yeah, I mean, the point being that if it were not, you would think over the thousands of years that this has been going on, that the sounds would be full of silt, that it'd just fill up, which kind of coming full circle on this, and Jim's over there nodding, he knows exactly where I'm going with this, is if we don't get Oregon Inlet open enough to be an outlet as much as it is an inlet, then what we were just talking about is, I mean, it's acting like, almost like a constriction at this point.
Yeah.
That's going to allow more and more of this type of sediment to build up in the sounds, which are going to have ecologically, I would think, a very detrimental effect on that being the nursery that we all know that it is at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm sure people have quantified the input, but essentially one of the things in eastern North Carolina that we're dealing with is that we have a pretty wide coastal plain. And so by the time that the rivers get, close to where they're feeding into these sounds, there isn't a whole lot of change in elevation like there would be up, further up towards Raleigh where you've, got a lot of flow velocity. So the river, I mean, they're almost, a lot of them are tidal moving, so far up into the system. So the flow velocities of the actual sediment input of what's coming into Pamlico Sound is probably a very small fraction of what's in it already. What's moving around and filling in these channels is just the resuspension of material and it moving around. And when you dig a channel deeper, essentially you're creating a bigger cross-sectional area, and so the velocities down that channel are lower than they would be anywhere else. And anytime you dig an artificial channel, it's always going to fill in with that sediment. So it's more of a resuspension of the sediment and it moving around, being mobile within the.
Well, in that regard, and you were talking about data, availability of data earlier. Would there be any data on core samples taken from the Sound 50 years ago, 25 years ago, versus samples that are taken now, which would maybe quantify how much more or less silt or fine particles are in the Sound now?
That's a good question. I know that there are some researchers looking at overwash fans closer to the backside of the islands and trying to see how, relating these overwash fans, the sand, even buried sand, so like paleo overwash fans, and trying to relate those to old storms and things like that. I'd say I don't know if researchers would specifically take cores in the same exact location looking for that thing. There may be. I'm just not aware of it. But certainly, bathymetric surveys as well. You could see areas that would be that would be shoaling in, and they probably are around the river input areas where there's high sediment.
Yeah.
So.
One of the things with Pamlico Sound, I mean, when you look at Ice Age runoff, and I mean, it was massive. You had 3,500 years of just gushes of water coming into Pamlico Sound, and what we're dealing with now is the impact of 17,000 years.
Quick question. So the water runoff we're receiving here, is it coming from Virginia or coming from western North Carolina?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, each river system would have its own watershed, but I think mostly North Carolina.
Yep.
Just one question. Tonight, you're asking the board to approve recommendation number one.
Number one.
The other recommendations, what are the triggers when we need to be deciding now it's time to go? Are you going to come back at a later date and give us those triggers?
I think we'd like to move forward with number two as fast as possible. I know that Brent has been working, budget numbers of what he's got the ability for within his department, but we're going to want to move forward pretty quickly with that because of the lag time that it takes to get the funding in place through the matching with the state. I mean, all those sediment cores should be, cost shared with the state through the shallow draft fund. I would say that one would be one that we want to advance, fairly quickly. And then, I mean, we probably aren't going to pull the trigger and start taking those cores until after we have this meeting with the agencies. But I think getting that request in to the state as soon as possible to start that process that they have to go through to get the funds in place, I think that would be a worthwhile endeavor.
And then you mentioned grant funding for the thin layer placement. I mean, is that something that would be available to us, or is that only available one time for that project?
No, I think there needs to be some offline discussions with folks at the Corps of Engineers that deal with those CAP 204 projects and the beneficial use, as well as kind of screening those beneficial uses and digging in a little bit. There's probably some politics to be played there in order to stack up against the other people. I think the first 10 of those beneficial use projects, when they first authorized 10, I think they got 90 different applications in. So I think there's probably some coordination that needs to occur with the Wilmington district and folks maybe at the state and federal congressional level to figure out how best to pitch that option.
And also, we need to get the state to buy into the idea of thin layer placement.
Yeah, that's been a hurdle.
All right, well, Ken, thank you. You're looking for us to approve recommendation number one, is that correct?
Correct.
I'd like to make that
Is the
motion
board
to approve.
prepared to make that?
I'd like to make a motion to approve recommendation one and take into consideration at our retreat the possibility of moving ahead with recommendation two.
Okay.
Can we add number 4 to that too? Can we at least start
Is that the
advancing?
core? Is that the core?
Advancing the GIS. No, the GIS capabilities.
Yeah, GIS should be easy one, I think. Yeah. Yeah, we can add that.
All right, recommendation is to approve recommendation 1 and 4.
And consider
And consider
2 and
at the
4
retreat.
at the retreat.
Okay,
I'll
consider
just
2 and 4 at the retreat.
I'll just put the recommendations at the retreat as an
Okay.
agenda item. We don't
All
need
right,
to.
okay.
That'd be fine.
Somebody mentioned a second, it was the vice chair. All right, any further discussion?
Just curious what the financial commitment of the decision to pursue recommendation one.
Nothing.
Steady as she goes, that's what we're
Zero.
doing.
Zero.
All right, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. Ken, thank you so much.
Great to see you all.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate
Great
all
job.
your help, all your work. County manager.
Yes, sir. Item 9 is a declaration of a conservation easement for Allis Holdings. Several meetings ago, you all approved a conservation easement. When we did that, we went back and we looked at it, and we changed the language in it to basically give us an easement over on Allis Holdings property to stage should we need to paint our water tank and all that sort of thing. So I bring it back to you for, I guess, reapproval since we changed it from the version that you all actually approved, but it changed to our benefit.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, there's a motion on the floor by the Commissioner House to approve, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Bateman. The floor is open for any additional comments. Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
And then item 10 is equipment financing, and I'll turn that over to Dave.
Hey, Dave, how you this evening?
Fine, thank you. Just very quickly, you remember at the, when we did the mid-year budget adjustments, you approved doing capital outlay for the year. So this is mainly garbage trucks, ambulances, and sheriff cars. We're financing almost 2.2 million. We took 5 bids, we took bids, there were 7 responses. All of them were less than 1%. So we're doing 36 months at a rate of 0.6734, which is, the winning bid was Bank of America. So to finance $2.2 million over 3 years, it's going to cost us $24,000.
That's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, 10 more.
Travis card? It's unbelievable.
That's
kind of a no-brainer.
It is. Yeah, I didn't bring the agenda sheet, but whatever Sally asked you to approve, I ask you to approve it, please.
We're living
I will
in
move to
bizarre
approve
times,
the
guys.
attached resolution.
We are living in bizarre times.
Yes.
We're lending millions of dollars with no interest while simultaneously flooding the system with trillions of dollars just fabricated out of thin air.
Yep.
I swear to God.
So
I don't-
motion
I
on the
don't know
floor
where
by
the end is.
Commissioner House to approve. Is there a second?
I second it.
I'm sorry, was it Jim? Okay, Commissioner Tobin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Dave.
That brings us to-
Can you get us a little bit better rate?
You getting some rates for me?
Can we get 6.6 or 0.66?
Next is the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have the approval of minutes from the March 1st meeting. We have a budget amendment for increased emergency management performance grant revenue. We have a Health and Human Services Public Health Division additional COVID-19 finance fund or vaccine funding, tax collector's report, and a Public Works budget amendment.
Move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor by Commissioner House. It's been seconded by Commissioner Bateman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Next are your board appointments. The first is the Rodanthe-Waves-Salvo Community Center. Joey O'Neill resigned back in October, and the Community Center recommends Cheryl Blankenship to complete his term, and there were no other applications.
Move to approve Ms. Blankenship, please.
So motion to approve by Commissioner Couch. Second.
Second.
Commissioner House. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
And the next is the Mans Harbor Marina Commission. The terms of Cindy Holda, Ladd Bayless, Jonathan Oglesby, and Jesse Troy Outland Jr. all expire. They would all like to be reappointed.
Reappoint.
There's a motion on the floor by Commissioner House to
I'll second.
reappoint all. It's been seconded by Commissioner Tobin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
That'd be your agenda, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, County Manager. That brings us to item 13. That's Commissioner's business. And I would ask Commissioner Tobin, would you kick that off this evening?
I would like to, thank you. As you alluded to in your opening statements, I also spent a couple hours with Congressman Murphy at the North Carolina Marine Industrial Park Authority. And he's just a great guy. We really had a good time with him. We took him to the Aids to Navigation, the Coast Guard Aids to Navigation facility, went on a complete tour of that. And then we went down to Blackwell's, where they do a lot of the boat repairs and fabrication, and had a very interesting time there. But I think the highlight of it is, and I don't know how many of the board members know, but they're building at the old gunboat facility. There's one boat in that building, and that boat is somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 feet long and close to 30 feet wide. It's a aluminum catamaran that is going to be outfitted with a submarine and also with a helicopter. It's fascinating. It's a huge project. And it's something that, speaking of dredging, it's something that we're also going to have to do a little bit of dredging at the bottom of that boat ramp when we go and launch it. But it's, I'll keep you posted on when the launch date gets closer, because it's going to be something you're going to want to see. Congressman Murphy's also totally 100% behind all of our dredging needs. He gets it. He understands it. He knows the importance of the inlet and all of our waterways. He's also already negotiated some money for dredging for Dare County. So it was a very positive meeting. And next up, I'm very proud to say Dorothy and Benny have been working on a video of our new dredge and the project. And if we could see that video now, that'd be great.
With more than 100 miles of coastline and a wide array of surrounding waterways that range from sounds to salt marshes, the Outer Banks is home to one of the largest fishing industries in the entire country. Critical sectors of the Outer Banks economy rely on access through these channels that serve as a highway for our watermen. Commercial and sport fishing, as well as its supporting industries, which include boat building, seafood packing and processing, and tournament fishing, are all integral to the Outer Banks economy, providing thousands of jobs and contributing hundreds of millions of dollars to Dare County each year. Because the livelihoods of so many people who live and work along the Outer Banks are reliant upon these waterways, it's crucial that they are properly dredged to eliminate the shoaling that takes place under the surface.
One of our challenges at Oregon Inlet is to deal with all the shoaling issues that we have. There's about 1.2 million cubic yards of sand that move across the inlet every year, and removal of it's paramount. This really affects our recreational fishing and especially our commercial fishing business. We virtually have lost just about all of our commercial fishing fleet because of the shoaling issues. Shoaling's good and bad all year long. When we have a dredge here, typically it's maintained at a pretty good pace, but as soon as the dredges leave, we have real issues with it filling back in real quick.
Without proper dredging, commercial fishing boats and recreational vessels both run the risk of running aground in the shallow water. And as a result, many Outer Banks fishermen end up taking their catch to neighboring states, whose waterways are more accessible. As commercial fishermen start to take their catch to landings elsewhere, supporting industries such as seafood packing and processing tend to follow. And the impact on the local economy can be devastating and often leads to a negative impact on future quotas. To ensure that vessels are able to safely navigate the channels and inlets that exist in Dare County, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has the responsibility of dredging the federally authorized channels. But a lack of time and resources has significantly held up many dredging projects and allowed shoaling to take over and shifting sandbars to seal off some of these waterways to the boats that require deeper water to make it through. Recognizing the importance of open waterways and the critical role they play in the local economy, Dare County officials decided to take a proactive approach to the region's shoaling problems and begin the search for a long-term solution.
We went up to the state and we talked to Senator Bill Cook, who's retired now, and we requested some meetings with some of the other senators and representatives, and we took them, Moffitt and Nichols had done an economic impact study for us. We showed them the value of an open inlet, which is about $500 million a year, plus or minus, depending on the year. With a fully opened inlet, it could be up to $1 billion a year. So we showed them that it was a good idea, and we sold them on the idea of having a public-private partnership with a dredge. And we got a $15 million forgivable loan grant from the state that Dare County administers. And well, we entered into a private relationship with EJE Dredging out of Greenville, and they are the ones that are actually in construction of the dredge.
The legislation that was required to establish the private partnership to build the new vessel was passed by the North Carolina General Assembly in 2017. This legislation set forth that Dare County's Oregon Inlet Task Force would oversee dredge construction and eventually its operation. A considerable amount of time went into developing the specifications and bidding for the dredge project. And in 2019, the Dare County Board of Commissioners unanimously approved the contract for construction of the dredge. which will be named the Miss Katie.
So who will benefit from this dredge? Well, I think all the recreational fleet, but I think the most will be the commercial fleet. As I said earlier, the commercial fleet, there used to be over 200 trawlers in Wanchese. There's just a handful now, and the reason is there's not enough water going out the inlet. We've got commercial vessels right off our coast shrimping that can't bring their catch in here because the water's not deep enough. So they're taking it up to Norfolk, or they're taking it down south, and it really hurts North Carolina.
The dredge, which is currently under construction in Louisiana, will improve efficiency by maximizing time and productivity to more adequately perform and manage dredging operations throughout Dare County. While it is not intended to replace the Army Corps of Engineers' routine dredging operations, having access to this dredge will dramatically increase the capacity of area dredging and help ensure that Dare County's waterways stay open.
Well, having access to this dredge and having a dredge here full-time is going to be huge because we're going to be able to be there right after a storm, hit all the hot spots going in and out of the channel, and just constant maintenance, which it's never had.
Once it's complete and arrives in Dare County in April 2022, the dredge will be able to operate up to 12 hours a day, weather permitting, providing strategic dredging in area waterways. As previously mentioned, those dredging operations will be managed by the Oregon Inlet Task Force, whose members will plan, schedule, and monitor the success of local dredging projects.
The Oregon Inlet Task Force is the overseer of all of it. By state law, the state put the task force in charge of the project. We will schedule when and where the dredge goes. And really, it's a North Carolina dredge, but it'll be between Oregon Inlet and Hatteras to begin with until that loan's paid back. But if there's someplace else that needs it, you know, we can schedule for it.
The public-private partnership dredge project marks a massive step forward in Dare County's ongoing mission to keep these vital waterways open for commercial and recreational vessels, an effort that will have a profound and positive impact on the area's economy, local workforce, and the livelihoods of everyone living on the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
I'm just really excited about getting a new dredge here. It's a project that has never been done anywhere else in the United States. There's a lot of other municipalities. Virginia Beach is real interested in how we've done this. And I've been told there's harbors both on the West Coast and the East Coast that are watching to see how successful this is. And if it is, I venture to say there'll probably be more private dredges doing this. Well, big shout out to Dorothy for managing this project for us, and to Benny. It was a good thing, and I've got some very exciting information to share with you guys now. Today, this morning, they started cutting steel. So it's official, it's under construction.
Fantastic.
Rob, that's for you.
Fantastic.
I'm a true believer,
That's all I
Jim.
have, Chairman.
True believer.
Thank you, Commissioner Tobin. That was a great video. Benny did a great job.
By the way, I put that video on our Pirates Cove website, and we've had several thousand views of that video already.
Oh, I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have. That was great job. Thank you. And great news to hear that steel being cut. Commissioner Ross.
I only have one item I wanted to share. We continue to meet a small subgroup regarding the Dare County or Outer Banks event site in Nags Head. It's being chaired by Lee Nettles of the Tourism Board. It's got a number of representatives on that group or participating with the group, as I am. And we had a guest speaker explaining a lot of the South Padre Island Event Center in Texas this past meeting. I mean, he was a fine fella, nice presentation. We have not gotten past the basic hurdles. What are we going to do with wastewater? What are we going to do about a hotel, which is being fairly vigorously opposed by the Hotel Association to be combined with the conference center? And what are we going to do about parking? We're sort of in a chicken and an egg situation. Nags Head will not opine or review or comment on anything until there's a proposal. We don't have a proposal because we don't know if we should propose something with a hotel and with parking without variances or adjustments to the town ordinances. So it's been a little bit of a frustrating experience for me, trying to see whether this is going to move forward as an event site or simply remain the multiple 15 acres of open field area that's currently over at Soundside Park. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Ross. Commissioner House.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries website, there is a survey out, and I encourage all of our watermen to take the survey. It's a joint venture between Coastal Carolina River Watch, the North Carolina Marine Fisheries Commission, and the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries, and is being overseen and compiled by East Carolina University. This survey is, they're trying to determine, with the North Carolina fishing communities, to determine the effects of water quality in our fisheries. Now, this is something that we've been trying to put out for years, is that a lot of the fishing issues that we have is not because they've been overfished, but because of our water quality as well. And so we need to really determine, which is which. Are we overfishing or is it our water quality? Both entities we can fix, but they need to be able to see what the problems are. So I encourage all of our watermen and especially our fish houses and our dealers, fill that survey out and give them as much information as possible. And it could really help us with our water quality issues in the sounds that we already know, as we've discussed earlier today with sediment, that there are problems. So it'll also help give our fisheries more insight of what's going on in our habitats. So yes, please definitely go on the website, fill out your surveys. I do not have a pet of the week. I know it's one of our favorite things. But the good news about it is, because we couldn't film one today, is because they were moving today to go to their new temporary home. And I say it's a new temporary home because hopefully you will go to the new home, the new temporary home, and take one to your permanent home. So they're being moved over today, and that's the reason why we do not have a pet of the week this week. And I do believe we have the ribbon cutting on
Big day, Friday.
Friday at 11 o'clock.
Fine.
So 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock.
Yep. And I'm really excited about that. And when I was hearing about it today, we're moving the animals over today, I was thinking of the old adage, herding cats. So I'm sure they probably had to do that today too. And so I don't have that, but I do have our day in history. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar was assassinated. In 1767, President Andrew Jackson was born. And in 1933, Chief Justice Ruth Ginsburg was born. And on this day in 1820, Maine was entered as a 23rd state in the Union. With that, thank you very much and good evening.
Thank you, Commissioner House. Did I hear something today was National Pie Day or something?
That was yesterday.
Was that yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I couldn't remember.
It's come full circle.
Vice Chairman Overman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last Monday, I participated along with Dare Center in the March for Meals program and delivered meals to the homes of some of the seniors in the county. And I'll tell you what, guys, this is a great program. I know you've all been invited to participate in this, and I would encourage you to do so. It's really a great program and certainly beneficial to those folks who need it. I want to thank Derek Kelly for coming on and having the broadband discussion. I hope that clarified a little bit of something and may have been confusing on some other points. But in addition to that, I also spoke with the Government Relations Director of Charter Spectrum and requested that they have their engineering department get an estimate of what would be required to get their services into the mainland areas of the county where it does not exist. And he is asking his engineering department to do that. I will follow up prior to our retreat to hopefully have some idea of what that is. And basically that discussion was to find out how they could potentially be incentivized to get their service out there. I mean, it would represent for folks that, I'm the same way, folks that have 10 meg service to go to, 400 megs if they want to, certainly 10 times at 100 megs. So as you heard from that prior discussion today, that would more than suffice to satisfy the needs of families that have 3 and 4 computers running all at the same time. So anyway, that is underway, and hopefully we'll get something that we can work with off of those discussions. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Appreciate all your hard work on that. Commissioner Baker.
I'm just fortunate to be here.
Well, we're fortunate to have you here.
I have nothing to share.
Thank you. Commissioner Couch.
Irvin, I was hoping you'd kill some time, bro. Proud to announce or just make you aware. I'm sure it's been in the Voice, it's certainly been in the Island Free Press. They're starting today on the Hatteras Village multi-use pathway, which is really going to be nice. It's nice to see the village down there kind of come out a little bit and recoup. The pandemic has been really hard on just some of the shops, some of the restaurants. I mean, Hatteras Village has got some great restaurants down there, so this pathway, it should be done by August, and so the next time you get down to the village there, I think you're going to see some concrete flying around, but it's really nice. It'll be a showpiece. And just the second thing, being in the tourism sector like all of us are, if we missed 6 weeks or thereabouts when these drastic forecasts for what could or what could conceivably happen to our population when this occurred. Now, if you think 2020 was a zoo, here comes 2021, because we got those 6 weeks back, and that was just a warm-up for what's going to happen in 2021. I think it's going to be a bang-up year, and here it comes. So 2021 will be interesting to see. It's going to be the typical demands and stresses and highway issues and wall-to-wall traffic. But the Outer Banks is a destination. They're coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Couch. I couldn't agree more. They're already here.
Oh, yeah.
So, County Manager, that brings you to County Manager's business.
Yes, sir. A couple of things. One, down in Hatteras at the South Ferry Channel, we've been trying to dredge that out for a while, and they've had some difficulties there. We've had a breakthrough. They finally got the hole punched with side catch so they can get in there with a hopper dredge and actually do the dredging. The result of the problems with getting through that little 20-foot, 200-foot section there, and the delays are going to cost some more money and require about 10 more days of dredging. That 10 more days of dredging exceeds our dredging budget by about, $58,000 or thereabouts. So what I'm asking you tonight is to authorize me to take $60,000 out of our contingency fund and move it over to the Hatteras Dredging Fund and sign whatever appropriate budget amendments I need to do that so that we can complete that project. That will then exhaust all of our funds, and actually it'll end right at the close of our dredge window, so we won't be able to do any more dredging down there this year anyway, but this will allow us to finish that project.
Move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor to approve by Commissioner Tobin, Commissioner House,
Second.
Vice Chairman Overman,
Run the
Commissioner
roll call
Couch. We do need somebody to second it.
I'll second it. I'll second it.
Commissioner Bateman.
Attaboy.
Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries
They have
unanimously.
struggled down there.
Yes, they have.
Just several heads up, a meeting ago or 2 meetings ago, we talked about moving an easement over there on Airport Road to put it between two property lines. We sent our water crews out there with our ground penetrating radar, and sure enough, there was a culvert there. And so we haven't signed or done the easement. I told the property owner that before we would move forward, he's got to figure out how to get that culvert moved to the place where he wants it. Because it's obviously connected into some kind of a drainage system there. So that's just out there if you hear about it. That's going to trigger some discussions at our retreat about stormwater in that area and that whole culvert system, and some ideas and thoughts we need to go through about that as well. So just a heads up on that. Secondly, we agreed at the last meeting to purchase the Maco's Mike property in conjunction with Kill Devil Hills to build an EMS station. I wanted you to be aware, we had a purchase price on there, and that's not changed. He has talked with his accountant. He may be able to get some tax deductions by doing a donation. So our purchase price, what we're going to pay, remains the same. He may make the purchase price higher and donate the difference. And our contract, if anybody would look at it, would show a purchase price higher than what we approved, but it will show what we're paying to be exactly what we approved. And I didn't want there to be any confusion in case somebody saw or looked at it. You needed to know that's why that's there. And then the final thing is, the chairman, you brought up the Rodanthe boat dock project, and that's a good thing. I will say I've started getting some phone calls from people that use the dock and from some of the businesses that are relying on the people that use the docks, and they're concerned that the long closure is going to negatively impact them, and I get that. Brent has been working to try to figure out what we can do to resolve some of that. We went to the Wildlife Resources Commission to see if we could delay the project to the off time of the year to lessen those impacts. They'll let us delay it, but what they said, if we delay it, it won't come back on the rotation for 3 or 4 years, and they can't guarantee that they'll even have any money then. So delaying the project is not an option for us. We've been working for 3 years to try to get this done. We can't delay it 3 more and then find out we can't do it. And so that isn't an option. And so the other options are to try to find out if there's some way to allow use while it's being constructed. Don't know whether that'll work or not, but we're at least having the discussions. We certainly want to have as few impacts as we can. And if we can help these folks and still get it built, we will. But a lot of that's going to be under the control of the Wildlife Resources Commission, and we don't know about it. So, but we are working with the folks. We want to help them if we can. And I wanted you to know that in case you get phone calls. We're aware, and we've been working, and Brent's been working hard on that as we speak. So those are the only things that I have.
Bobby, in that same regard, just so the information's out there, it's my understanding that Wildlife Resources Commission has a project underway now at the boat ramp that's beside the Pirates Cove Bridge. Yes. And going over Roanoke Sound. And my understanding is that, and they've got that blocked off right now, and my understanding is that that's going to be opened back up about the middle of May. So that landing is going to be out of whack too for a while. It's going to be great because the overwash that they were getting is affecting the road coming in there. It was flooding constantly, and they're building that up, I think, to avoid the flooding. So a lot of work being done. It's going to catch spring fishing for sure. But
and just to add on to that a little bit, Wally, they're saying mid-May to the end of May for completion, but they're increasing the amount of parking spaces. They're going to actually have boat parking or trailer parking spaces coming almost all the way out to the light.
Wow.
Which is good. Needed. Yeah.
And in Rodanthe, we're trying to accommodate a lot of uses. We've got to keep an access way open because we've got a helipad there. If we had to use that helipad, we got to be able to get in and out. We've got a recycling drive-up center there. We've got to be able to have access to that as well. And then we have the commercial fishermen who use on the other side of the ferry dock where they come in and put their crab pots and that kind of thing. We've allowed that. we'd like for them to continue to do that. So if you allow all these other accesses, they still have to have somewhere to stage all their materials and do all that work. It really fills that site up quickly, and so I don't know what the options are going to be or how we're going to do it, but I do want everybody to know we're working on it.
Let me ask you and Danny a question. It was brought to my attention that there's an area just south of the harbor that was used as a ramp a long time ago. What are they referring to?
So the ramp that they're rebuilding isn't really a ramp. It's marl that was placed to allow a slope, but it's not built like a ramp that you would normally have. It had some problems, and it's very difficult to maintain, and it wasn't a very good ramp, which is why it's being replaced. I understand the same thing you are, that there was a similar ramp that's now overgrown on the other side.
Right.
Again, whether that's there, whether we aren't going to be able to do much under the water there without going in and getting new permits and doing all that stuff. Could we do something that doesn't require a permit and make that accessible? I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know if we could do that, how it would accommodate the traffic or the parking or what that kind of traffic would do to their construction. And I mean, there's a lot of variables we just don't know, but we're talking to Wildlife Resources about that.
Okay, good. Just look into it. Just
Working on it.
so we can.
And I probably got the same call as you did, because I assured that guy we would look at all those options.
Okay, good. Yep. Good deal. All right.
Okay, and that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Bobby. Ms. Hester, Public Information Officer, you have anything else for us this evening?
I would just make mention of the ribbon cutting for Friday. Commissioner House mentioned it, and it is exciting, and I am watching the weather very closely.
So you saying you're going to bring us umbrella?
I may even have to get a tent, but I haven't made that decision yet.
Okay.
I'm hoping with 50 people, and just because of the layout of the facility, we can't go inside. So we will be outside. You may need some rain gear. We'll be sending updates to those who are attending, just as a reminder as to what the weather's going to do. And just for the public, it's disappointing because it can't be open to everyone, but it is going to be available online. And I'd like to give a shout out to Current TV, because they went in and did a walkthrough so that at the end of the virtual ribbon cutting, the people watching will get to see what it looks like inside, because we thought that was really important. And the SPCA, I think, is planning to open that afternoon to the public, but of course with limited numbers. So they're kind of reminding people not to flood in because,
it's a 25 capacity.
That's right. So somewhat limited, but they'll have lots of time to go and visit if it's,
We should be used to rain. As recent years, every ribbon cutting we've done is under.
Well, I think it's iffy for the morning. I think it's going to get worse. We're going to have some rain tomorrow and some other days, but it looks like there's also some wind, but I am keeping my fingers crossed. I ask y'all to do the same.
Good deal. Thank you, Dorothy. Mr. Clausen, our Finance Director, you got anything else for us?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Well, with that being said, we need a motion to adjourn until 9 a.m. on April the 7th.
So moved.
Been a motion made by Commissioner Ross, and it is seconded by Commissioner Tobin and House. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.